Chapter 231, A Stand at the Ministry's Door. Blocking the door? Professor Babbling raised an eyebrow at Blake. Am I to understand that today, an 11-year-old has declared his intention to blockade the entrance to a national ministry of magic? You should realize I'm not your average 11-year-old, Blake retorted with a smirk. I find it quite easy to outmaneuver them. Professor Babbling sighed, exasperation evident in her voice. What on earth has happened? The newspapers are filled with stories about you. Blake shrugged dismissively. If everything in the newspapers were true, then we'd be living in a truly dismal world. Besides, if I were inclined to kidnap anyone, it would be you, not those two scrawny kids. Seeing Babbling's stern expression, Blake quickly shifted the topic. Before I go and make a stand at the door, could you enlighten me on why you're here? France is renowned for its masters of ancient runes, Professor Babbling explained. French alchemists are considered the best. Ancient runes and alchemy are inseparable. So I came here to introduce our magic scrolls. Blake sighed, sensing the outcome. Let me guess, it didn't go well? Exactly, Babbling admitted with a hint of defeat. They argued that there's no need for magic scrolls for tasks that can be accomplished with a simple spell. They deemed my efforts unnecessary. Blake shook his head. As I've always said, the magic scroll business needs to target the right audience. Remember Filch? He, or someone like him, is our ideal customer. What's the point in offering a fine-tooth comb to a bald man? So, what's our next step? Clearly, magic scrolls represent the best application of ancient runes. Babbling pondered. Blake noticed a group of people gathering in the square. Let's discuss this later. For now, I have a door to block. As Blake walked away, Babbling felt an urge to stop him, to prevent him from doing something foolish. Yet, recalling his unique talents beyond ancient runes, she hesitated. Blake, you're certainly not the typical Hufflepuff. Even a honey badger is still a badger, Blake called back, his voice fading into the distance. Wasn't he just here? Where did he go? One of the newcomers in the square muttered in confusion. You must be mistaken. He's a wanted man. He wouldn't dare show up at the ministry's entrance. Is he seeking his own demise? No, I'm certain he was here a moment ago. Let's search the area, another suggested. Unbeknownst to them, Blake had approached unnoticed. His attire was meticulously chosen, not a single piece out of place, devoid of any adornments that might hinder his movements, a clear sign of preparation for combat. Hi, were you looking for me? Blake inquired, his French slightly awkward, as he stepped forward with his large silver wand, a playful smirk on his lips. The group turned, their expressions shifting from astonishment to disbelief, then to recognition. Oh, judging by your faces, introductions seem unnecessary, Blake observed, noting their hands inching towards their wands. Disarm, he commanded, his spell casting swift and precise. The elite aurors, caught off guard, scrambled to respond, but Blake was already ahead, his actions both reasonable and within the bounds of magical law, yet daring and bold. At the same moment, without any prior warning, they encountered Blake. Blake's magical prowess was formidable, enhanced further by his possession of the Supreme Lord of the Rings. This artifact not only amplified his magical strength, but also his physical resilience, elevating his combat capabilities exponentially. Consequently, even without resorting to supreme magic, Blake was more than capable of handling such assaults. Opting not to use his wand, Blake simply lifted his left hand, summoning a robust armor spell that enveloped him protectively. The spells cast by the elite aurors collided with the iron armor spell, failing to cause even the slightest disturbance to its protective barrier. The presence of such skillful resistance immediately signaled to the aurors the extraordinary capabilities of their opponent. The fact that their combined offensive was effortlessly neutralized by a mere child, approximately 11 years old, left them astounded. Ding! Shock emotion detected, the system announced, capturing the moment's intensity. Meanwhile, Babbling, concealed in a nearby alley, was prepared with a stack of magic scrolls, ready to create a diversion and extract Blake if necessary. However, witnessing Blake's adept handling of the situation, Babbling silently retracted the scrolls, impressed yet again by the young wizard's prowess. This kid never ceases to amaze, Babbling thought to himself. Blake, demonstrating restraint, chose not to immediately overpower his adversaries. Instead, he allowed their emotions to escalate before decisively incapacitating them. Ultimately, out of the 5 Aurors, Blake intentionally spared one, allowing him to escape. The remaining 4 were subdued, each sporting a sizable lump on their head, courtesy of Blake's wand work. Blake then turned his attention to the entrance of the Ministry of Magic, setting up a pea shooter capable of rapid fire. Although this initial version of the pea shooter lacked significant power, it compensated with an enhanced rate of fire, proving effective for casting basic spells. Accompanied by the giant wolf Fenrir, now in the form of a husky, Blake took a seat on a bench near the ministry's entrance, adopting the relaxed posture of a tourist. Fenrir lay at his feet, eyes closed, as Blake had strategically allowed one Auror to escape and raise the alarm. Not long after, a group of more than a dozen Aurors burst from the ministry's doors, launching an immediate assault on Blake. However, they were met with a barrage of projectiles from the pea shooter, which outpaced their spellcasting. The Aurors were taken by surprise, not anticipating an attack from such an unconventional source, resulting in several being hit before they could even complete their spells. Blake remained seated, eyes closed, not bothering to witness the chaos he had orchestrated. In the distance, Babbling, now leisurely seated on a small bench within the alley, watched the spectacle unfold. This is a bold move, directly challenging the French Ministry of Magic, Babbling mused, recognizing the extent to which Blake had provoked his adversaries. Blake's casual demeanor in the face of conflict not only humiliated the French Ministry of Magic, but also deeply offended the pride of the elite Aurors. Ding! Humiliation detected, the system chimed, followed by, Ding! Congratulations to the host for acquiring a silver treasure chest. Despite the initial success of the pea shooter, the remaining Aurors quickly adapted, invoking the Iron Armor Curse to shield themselves from the subsequent attacks. These Aurors, being highly skilled and experienced in combat, managed to regroup and fortify their defenses. However, Blake, undeterred, remained a formidable opponent, showcasing his strategic acumen and magical mastery. Blake had no intention of achieving overwhelming victory with his array of pea shooters. Their attack power might have been minimal, but their ability to provoke was unmatched. Suddenly, a few elite Aurors, demonstrating both agility and cunning, managed to circumvent the pea shooters. They launched a series of explosive spells directly at Blake and the defenses he had set up behind him. Simultaneously, the Auror who had regained his composure at the entrance unleashed a barrage of powerful and lethal spells. The time for non-lethal measures such as stun spells or disarming spells was clearly over. The aggressors were incensed. The French Ministry of Magic's headquarters, since its establishment, had only faced a significant disturbance once before, many years ago, caused by Newt. Never had it experienced such a blatant affront. Explosions rocked the area where Blake was positioned, sending shockwaves through the vicinity. Even Muggles in the nearby area were startled by the intensity of the blasts. Professor, Babbling, observing from a distance, couldn't help but stand up in concern. She had faith in Blake's abilities, yet the onslaught of deadly spells made her worry. However, she forced herself to stay calm, trusting in Blake's cunning. She knew that if Blake had chosen to confront the ministry in such a bold manner, he must have had a plan to withstand their attacks. As the smoke and dust began to clear, the advancing Aurors halted in disbelief. At the center of the recent explosion, Blake remained seated, utterly unscathed, not even having shifted his posture. This was inconceivable to the Aurors. The barrage of spells should have been enough to take down even a formidable creature like a fire dragon, yet Blake and the bench he sat on were completely untouched. The Aurors hadn't seen the seraphim shield that protected Blake due to the obscuring smoke and dust. To them, it appeared as though Blake had effortlessly neutralized all their attacks, a feat that seemed nothing short of miraculous. Blake slowly stood up, a slight smile playing on his lips. This smile, in the eyes of the Aurors, was a blatant taunt. Despite their combined efforts, they had failed to overcome a single individual, igniting a deep sense of humiliation within them. Holding his wand casually between his fingers, Blake addressed the Aurors with a tone of mock introduction. Hello, fellow Aurors of the French Ministry of Magic. My name is Blake Green. I believe many of you recognize me. After all, I'm worth 500,000 galleons. Perhaps some of you even sleep with my picture under your pillows. If you're after the bounty, you don't need to go to such lengths. I'm right here. But as you've just witnessed, your efforts to breach my defenses were futile. The Aurors, seething with anger at Blake's words, were at a loss. Blake's ability to withstand the assault of so many without so much as a scratch suggested he was no ordinary adversary. Faced with the unknown, none dared to make the next move. Blake continued, his voice laced with disdain. I stand before you, a bounty of 500,000 galleons, yet you lack the capability to claim it. Are the Aurors of the French Ministry of Magic nothing more than money grubbers? His disappointment was palpable as he surveyed the group. I had heard of your decisiveness, your willingness to attack without hesitation. I thought you were capable. But now, I see. Are you all struck dumb? Or are you simply cowards, too afraid to take what you desire? I'm too scared to speak? Blake taunted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Since you're afraid, perhaps you should consider surrendering. I've heard that no one can defeat the French until they surrender, and it seems to hold true. Blake continued, his words causing the faces of the Aurors to twist in anger. Blake Green, do you realize the extent of trouble your actions have caused? A middle-aged Auror exclaimed, his voice laced with fury. Oh, and what exactly have I done? Blake responded, spreading his hands in a gesture of innocence. I've merely been sitting here, enjoying the view. How have I caused any trouble? From the very beginning, you've launched attacks against us, exploding curses, smashing curses. How can you justify such ruthless actions against someone who's merely observing the scenery? The middle-aged Auror accused. Have you already forgotten about those potted plants surrounding you? He added, his tone still heated. My precious plants only retaliate against those who show hostility towards me. If it weren't for some of you initiating attacks, they wouldn't have responded. Blake explained calmly. The middle-aged Auror was momentarily at a loss for words. Indeed, it was their group who had first attempted to cast spells on Blake upon his appearance. However, those who had attacked were quickly subdued by the plants before they could even complete their spells. Moreover, the few individuals my plants did manage to knock down suffered nothing more than a few bruises. None of the injuries were fatal, Blake pointed out. But the spells you aimed at me were lethal, explosion curses, shattering curses, splitting curses. If not for my abilities, I would have perished here. You were attempting to kill me, Blake accused. And now, for merely defending myself against your lethal intentions, you claim that my actions will bring me immense trouble? I've never encountered such audacity. Blake's retort left the group of Aurors with expressions that were a mix of frustration and embarrassment. Indeed, since Blake's appearance, the Aurors from the French Ministry of Magic had been the aggressors. All of Blake's responses were purely defensive. But you are a wanted criminal. It's within our rights to attack you first, one of the Aurors argued, trying to justify their actions. Are you truly an Auror? Have you not even familiarized yourself with the laws of your own Ministry of Magic? Blake countered, his question leaving the Auror speechless. In 1989, the French Ministry of Magic issued a decree, Article 756, Subarticle 3, which states, all wanted criminals and fugitives, when showing no intent to attack and demonstrating a willingness to surrender, must not be attacked without provocation. Blake recited, I have not initiated any attacks against you. Do I not fit within the criteria of this rule? Blake challenged. The middle-aged Auror found himself without a response. Indeed, such a regulation existed. They had been insulted, and several among them injured, yet Blake's actions were legally justified. How could such an absurd situation arise? Chapter 232, Negotiating Conditions with Grindelwald. Has your house been smashed by the voodoo party? After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man finally spoke. So, you're admitting that you surrendered yourself? To be more accurate, from your perspective, it might seem that way, Blake clarified. However, from my point of view, that's not exactly the case. The middle-aged man frowned, puzzled. From your perspective, then, what's your reason for being here? Blake eyed the man in front of him. Before we proceed, may I know your identity and name? It's crucial for me to understand whether you have the authority to make decisions on this matter. Otherwise, It would be unfortunate to have immediate regrets after our discussion. The man responded with a deep voice. I am Al Alexis, the head of the Auror office at the French Ministry of Magic. Does my identity suffice for you to disclose your true intentions? Barely. Blake mused, seemingly unimpressed. Alexis couldn't help but grimace. As the head of the Auror office, he commanded hundreds of elite Aurors and held a significant position within the French Ministry of Magic. Yet in Blake's eyes, his status was just barely sufficient. You may feel dissatisfied, but you must understand that I have a bounty of 500,000 galleons on my head. For those of insufficient rank, their words in the face of such a bounty might as well be meaningless, Blake explained calmly. His point was clear. The higher Alexis's position, the more he represented the ministry's authority, and the less likely any agreement would be overturned. So, what brings you here? Alexis asked, his patience wearing thin. He had no desire to engage in lengthy discussions with this young man. Ideally, they would simply apprehend him. However, after witnessing Blake's ability to withstand the powerful spells of dozens of elite Aurors unscathed, Alexis knew he had to tread carefully. Blake's capabilities suggested he could cause significant upheaval in France, and a direct confrontation could result in unacceptable losses. It seems you're more rational than many, Alexis, a commendable trait for the head of the Auror office, Blake said with a smile, noticing Alexis's impatience. Enough, Alexis thought, eager to conclude the matter. Well, I'm actually here to clarify a misunderstanding, Blake began. Clarify what exactly? The rumors that I'm a kidnapper, Blake stated. Merlin knows I didn't kidnap Cassandra and Fleur. If you don't believe me, feel free to ask them. It baffles me how, with one of them in the hospital, I'm still suspected of being the kidnapper, especially given my age. Alexis's expression darkened. You caused a scene at the entrance of the French Ministry of Magic just to clear up this misunderstanding? You could have had any Auror relay this message. Why insist on doing it here? Oh, Alexis, it seems you don't have as much control over your Aurors as you think, Blake remarked. I attempted to explain myself to the first 2 Aurors I encountered, but they wouldn't listen. Every Auror who sees me immediately reaches for their wand to cast a spell. Even with the supposed hostages by my side, they acted recklessly, showing no concern for their well-being. Left with no choice, I had to fight my way here, seeking someone with the authority to understand and address the situation. Reasonably reason with me, Blake implored. Alai, I'm so fortunate. You're the first Auror I've met today who's willing to listen to my explanation, he added, a hint of relief in his voice. Alex's expression darkened further. How could someone of his intelligence and position be so easily swayed? He immediately grasped the underlying issue, the corrupting influence of wealth. Damn, these individuals deserve to be imprisoned, Alex growled in frustration. His anger wasn't directed at the injustice faced by Blake, but at the trouble caused by his subordinates. Their reckless actions had nearly cost him his career, and now, due to their haste, he found himself inadvertently offending 2 influential families, the Walleys and the Delacours, without even understanding the situation. Bastard! Alex cursed under his breath. Tell me, who initiated the attack? Blake responded, Actually, you're the first French Auror I've encountered. This revelation only fueled Alex's frustration. The entire debacle could have been avoided if his team had simply listened and acted according to protocol, rather than being blinded by the prospect of a hefty reward. Now, the reputation of the French Ministry of Magic was tarnished, and as the director of the Auror office, he had managed to alienate 2 powerful families. The implications were dire, considering the significant influence wielded by families capable of offering 500,000 galleons as a bounty. The fallout could severely impact the French wizarding community. As Alex pondered the gravity of the situation, he noticed Blake's calm demeanor. Despite facing a group of Aurors alone, Blake remained composed and confident, a rare trait for someone his age in such intimidating circumstances. This observation led Alex to wonder if Blake had anticipated this outcome. Realizing the importance of diffusing the situation, Alex softened his expression, surprising his subordinates by managing a smile. Blake, may I call you that? After all, you've been calling me a lie, he said, attempting to bridge the gap between them. Of course, Blake replied cheerfully. Although you might find it hard to believe, I assure you this has all been a misunderstanding, Alex explained, sheathing his wand as a sign of peace. He signaled his aurors to do the same and quickly addressed the growing crowd of muggles outside, instructing his team to repair the damage and cast memory charms as needed. If you consider this a misunderstanding, then we still need to discuss it, Blake said, returning his wand to his belt, unfazed by Alex's conciliatory gesture. Alex's attention was drawn to the dog lying next to Blake. Despite its odd appearance, its left eye seemingly vigilant and its right eye watchful, the occasional glint of intelligence and anger in its eyes unnerved Alex, a seasoned combatant. Recalling the calmness of the dog amidst the chaos of the explosion, Alex realized that this was no ordinary animal. Alex was taken aback by his unexpected discovery. For the first time in his career, he found himself negotiating with a suspect, a situation he had never anticipated. Yet, considering the circumstances, he believed accommodating the young man's demands was the best course of action. Blake, seizing the opportunity, laid out his conditions. Since this whole situation is a misunderstanding, the warrant for my arrest should be revoked, he stated confidently. Of course, the bounty on your head, not issued by the Ministry of Magic but still a concern, will be addressed once the misunderstanding is cleared up and the ladies are safely returned home, Alex replied, trying to maintain his composure. And the newspapers, they've tarnished my name, Blake added. I'll ensure they publish a retraction and restore your reputation, Alex assured him, though the strain was evident in his voice. Blake, pushing his advantage, then mentioned, given the indiscriminate attack I suffered, I believe a compensation for emotional distress is in order. Reluctantly, Alex agreed, his frustration growing. It was a bitter pill to swallow, compensating someone to avoid further damage to his career and, by extension, the ministry's reputation. And what about Cassandra and Fleur? They were attacked as well. They deserve compensation for their emotional distress, Blake continued. Of course, that's only fair, Alex conceded, his patience thinning. I'll collect their compensation on their behalf, Blake quickly added. Alex, though skeptical of Blake's injuries, agreed to cover medical expenses for all parties involved. The ladies' medical expenses will be compensated as well. We'll entrust you with their collection. Blake was inwardly pleased with how easily Alex had acquiesced to his demands. Accepting the offer, he couldn't help but commend Alex's generosity, albeit with a hint of sarcasm. Alex, forcing a smile, acknowledged Blake's gratitude. He had never felt so humiliated, yet he recognized the need to maintain a semblance of dignity for the French Ministry of Magic. The last thing he wanted was to give the minister any reason to reprimand him further. Our ministry has indeed lost face because of this incident, Alex admitted, hinting at a request for further concessions from Blake. Before he could finish, Blake interjected, You're a decent person, Alex, but remember, I'm not just any minor. Alex was momentarily confused. Even if you are a minor in the wizarding world, Blake clarified. What I mean is, as a minor, any demands you make on me require the consent of my guardian. Alex breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed Blake was open to negotiation, as long as it was conducted through his guardian. This revelation eased Alex's mind. Dealing with an adult guardian would likely simplify negotiations, allowing him to salvage some pride for the ministry and possibly recover some of what had been lost in this debacle. So, Blake, Alex began, his tone shifting to one of cautious optimism, let's discuss this with your guardian. It's crucial we find a resolution that benefits both parties. Who are your guardians? When can I speak to them? Alex inquired, his tone laced with a mix of curiosity and authority. Actually, right now, Blake responded, his voice calm and steady. Now? Alex's eyebrows furrowed in suspicion. He scanned the surroundings, but aside from a busy auror, there was no one else in sight. Blake turned his gaze in a specific direction. Professor, have you been concealing yourself there for quite some time? It might be appropriate for you to reveal yourself now. Alex followed Blake's gaze, though he saw nothing out of the ordinary. However, in the next moment, the air seemed to ripple, and two figures emerged from what appeared to be thin air. Alex's eyes widened in shock. Someone had been cloaked near him with an illusion spell, and he hadn't noticed? For him, the head of the Auror office, this was a deeply unsettling realization. If the individuals had been hostile, he could have been in grave danger. Yet, as the identities of the newcomers became clear, Alex's shock gave way to a mixture of realization and disbelief. If the person was Dumbledore, it made sense that his disillusionment charm was beyond Alex's detection. But wait, Dumbledore? This child's guardian was Dumbledore? And then, to add to his astonishment, Alex saw Grindelwald standing alongside Dumbledore. The sight of Dumbledore and Grindelwald appearing together was baffling. Was Blake's guardian Dumbledore, Grindelwald, or both? Grindelwald approached them, a smile playing on his lips as he clapped Alex on the shoulder. "Well, you're quite the gentleman, Mr. Alex. I had my doubts, but it seems you're reasonable after all." He casually twirled his wand in his hand. "Since you've agreed to Blake's requests, should you have any demands of your own, feel free to discuss them with either Dumbledore or myself." Alex stood there, his mind racing. The revelation that Blake's guardians were none other than Dumbledore and Grindelwald left him speechless. Negotiating with Dumbledore was one thing, but Grindelwald? Who in their right mind would dare to negotiate terms with Grindelwald? The mere thought of crossing Grindelwald conjured images of dire consequences, such as a vengeful hex shattering the windows of one's home in the dead of night. Chapter 233, Grindelwald, a unique method of persuasion. "Don't be nervous. If you have any requests, feel free to ask," Grindelwald said, his voice calm and seemingly friendly. We don't really have any special requests," came the hesitant reply. "Really?" "Yes, really. If there are no requests, may I take the person with me?" "Of course, there's no problem. Blake has never committed a crime." "Ah, that's wonderful to hear." "Ahem. Could I possibly move the wand away from my waist now? It's starting to hurt a bit." "Oh, my apologies. That's actually my pocket watch. I think it might have bumped into you," Grindelwald said, feigning innocence. Alexis was in a state of shock, a feeling likely shared by anyone in his position. Grindelwald had his left arm casually draped over Alexis's shoulder, speaking to him with a disturbing level of kindness. The situation was surreal, especially considering that Alexis, the head of the prestigious Auror office, was behaving as meekly as a lamb in Grindelwald's presence. This reaction wasn't entirely surprising. The era of Grindelwald's terror wasn't so far in the past. Alexis's father, an Auror, had been brutally defeated by Grindelwald's followers, a traumatic event that Alexis had witnessed as a child. This left him with a deep-seated fear. Now, facing the source of his childhood nightmares, Alexis managed to stand his ground and respond to Grindelwald's questions with as much dignity as he could muster, a testament to his resilience and training. Fortunately, Alexis had already negotiated the French Ministry of Magic's concessions with Blake before Grindelwald's arrival. Had they started negotiations with Grindelwald directly, they might have ended up conceding even more. Meanwhile, Dumbledore approached Blake with a mix of concern and admiration. After a moment of silence, he finally spoke. "You are so reckless. I just hope that you will think more about those who care about you before embarking on your next adventure," Dumbledore continued, his voice tinged with worry. Most people, upon receiving a key to another world, would hesitate to use it, uncertain of what dangers lay beyond. But Blake, driven by his thirst for adventure, had not hesitated. His bravery was beyond even that of a typical Gryffindor. Dumbledore understood that Blake's selection into Hufflepuff wasn't a mistake. Blake embodied the qualities of all 4 Hogwarts houses simultaneously. "Sorry, Professor Dumbledore," Blake said, genuinely apologetic. "You did a great job, Blake," Dumbledore reassured him, causing Blake to look at him in surprise. Praise from Dumbledore was unexpected, especially in these circumstances. Dumbledore explained his initial concerns about Blake's visit to the French Ministry of Magic, fearing it might lead to unnecessary chaos and violence. However, he was relieved to see Blake's wisdom and restraint. Despite his anger, Blake hadn't harmed anyone, a fact that Dumbledore found commendable. By keeping his actions within the bounds of the law and forcing the French ministry to compensate without resorting to violence, Blake had demonstrated a level of maturity and understanding of how to use the rules to his advantage. This approach was unlike Grindelwald's past actions, though it seemed Grindelwald had also learned to manipulate the rules in his favor. Dumbledore was relieved that Blake's actions didn't mirror the more destructive path Grindelwald had once taken. It was clear to Dumbledore that Blake wouldn't become the next Grindelwald or Voldemort. As Dumbledore surveyed the aurors around them, he leaned closer to Blake and whispered, his words carrying a mix of caution and hope for the future. In a voice audible only to them, someone whispered, "I'm proud of you, Blake." The story of an 11-year-old boy kidnapping two wealthy daughters had caused quite a stir. After brewing for several days, the narrative took a dramatic turn overnight. The Daily Prophet, a leading wizarding newspaper, underwent a high-level personnel change, followed by a sensational headline reversal in its latest edition. The boy previously labeled a kidnapper was now hailed as a rescue hero. The French Ministry of Magic had even offered a reward for his bravery, though it seemed more a symbolic gesture than actual compensation, a way for the ministry to save face. The newspaper presented a different version of the truth, omitting any mention of an otherworld expedition. Instead, it claimed the girls had accidentally stumbled into a magical relic and become trapped, with Blake heroically saving them. This narrative was more palatable to the public than the idea of venturing into another world. Dumbledore and Grindelwald, aware of Blake's unique abilities, preferred to keep them under wraps, fearing the implications of his venture into the realm of supreme magic. Grindelwald, lounging in his mansion, expressed his satisfaction with the article. "Simply perfect," he exclaimed, patting the newspaper with a smile. Blake, having already read the article, questioned Grindelwald's involvement. "Did you write this?" he asked, skeptical of the article's quality and Grindelwald's potential influence. Grindelwald, somewhat evasively, admitted to his role without going into details. "There are some things better left unsaid," he remarked. Blake's curiosity about how Grindelwald managed to get the article published led to a surprising revelation. Grindelwald hadn't coerced the editor-in-chief, but had instead negotiated directly with the owner of the Daily Prophet, even going so far as to place his wand against the man's throat as part of his persuasive tactics. Grindelwald's admission of acquiring the Daily Prophet to control public opinion didn't shock Blake, who was familiar with similar tactics used by Voldemort. However, Blake expressed his discomfort with the narrative's tone. "Heroic boy? Girls in the bloom of youth? How could you craft such an embarrassing story?" he lamented, criticizing the article's sensationalism and lack of subtlety. Grindelwald defended his approach, arguing that sensational stories were necessary to capture public interest. Without such intrigue, the story might not have garnered the attention it did, nor would it have swayed public opinion in their favor. Despite Blake's reservations, Grindelwald's manipulation of the media underscored the power of narrative control, even in the wizarding world. Grindelwald took a leisurely sip of his red wine before speaking, his tone laced with a certain gravitas. "You've been maligned and misunderstood, and the masses remain indifferent. Yet, the stigma of being labeled a kidnapper will cling to you, shaping their perception. Even if subsequent clarifications vindicate you, the initial label, the brand of your supposed guilt, will persist. The truth? It's of little consequence to them. After all, to the idle spectator, the notion of an innocent youth is far less tantalizing than that of a villainous one." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "Thus, while it may be simple to cleanse the mire you've been dragged through, erasing the labels others have imposed upon you is a far more daunting task. The solution? Forge a new identity, one so compelling it overshadows the old, becoming the new subject of conversation." Grindelwald's expression turned earnest as he continued. "So, despite the article's awkwardness, I've managed to recast you as a hero. Now, when people look at you, they'll see a valiant young hero, not the depraved kidnapper of a young girl. Do you grasp my meaning?" He gestured towards the newspaper, pointing out a specific paragraph. "The article suggests the two young girls harbor a secret affection for you, viewing you as their hero. This, in the eyes of the public, absolves you of any suspicion. After all, in the common psyche, only a fool would abduct someone who adores him." Blake rubbed his face, feeling a mix of reason and discomfort. "I can follow your logic up to a point, but the latter part, isn't that in poor taste?" "Absolutely not. Well, perhaps to some extent," Grindelwald conceded with a hint of amusement. Meanwhile, at the Worley estate, Cassandra found herself at the mercy of her father's incessant questioning. "Are you truly smitten with that boy?" I'm not." "Oh, you're so exasperating," Cassandra protested, covering her ears and turning away. Mrs. Worley observed her daughter with a thoughtful gaze, sensing there was more to the story. Over at the Delacour residence, Fleur faced a similar interrogation. No, it's all newspaper nonsense," she insisted, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Sister, do you intend to vie with Gabrielle for Blake's affection?" Gabrielle asked, her voice tinged with sorrow. Fleur was left speechless. Mr. Worley, overwhelmed by the unfolding drama, collapsed to the ground, lamenting the predicament of his tuiles. At the Granger household, a loud crash emanated from Hermione's room, prompting concern from Mrs. Granger. "Hermione, what happened?" "It's nothing, just a broken cup," Hermione called out, her voice louder than usual, betraying her agitation. Mrs. Granger, puzzled, murmured to herself, sensing her daughter's distress. Meanwhile, at the leaky cauldron, Tom reprimanded Hannah for burning the steak. "Ouch, Hannah! Your steak is burnt!" "Oh, sorry, Tom," Hannah apologized, her mind clearly elsewhere, having accidentally used a newspaper as kindling. Chapter 234. Hermione. "I heard you were busy over the holidays? Busy with the girl of Huichun?" Blake had spent a few days at Grindelwald's residence before returning to Nicole Flamel's home. This was due to Grindelwald needing to attend to the establishment of his new college in Nurmengard, leaving Blake to immerse himself in the study of alchemy under Flamel's guidance for the entirety of the summer. The intensive experiments nearly depleted his resources, but fortunately, the treasures he had recently acquired replenished his supplies. The threat of expulsion from Hogwarts was successfully averted, and the scheduled review by the Ministry of Magic was cancelled, thanks in part to Dumbledore's intervention. Although the Misuse of Magic Office remained operational, its procedures and tracking systems were finally being revised, a change prompted by Grindelwald's demands and surprisingly supported by Dumbledore. This led to a significant overhaul of the department. Blake celebrated a joyful birthday at Nicole Flamel's house. On September 1st, Grindelwald, showing considerable improvement in his driving skills, chauffeured Blake from Godric's Hollow to King's Cross in a classic car, employing a confusion charm to avoid attracting Muggle attention, a condition set by Dumbledore. It seemed Dumbledore's stance on Grindelwald had softened, possibly seeing Blake as a means to temper Grindelwald's more volatile tendencies. After dropping Blake off, Grindelwald quickly handed the car over to his brother and vanished, his duties as the newly appointed headmaster of the Nurmengard School of Magic demanding his attention. The school had surprisingly attracted a large number of students that year. Crossing through platform 9 3/4, Blake sensed a peculiar atmosphere. People nearby would lower their voices as he passed, resuming their conversations only once he was out of earshot. However, Blake detected no malice in their behavior. He attributed this change to Grindelwald's influence, realizing the man's adeptness at shaping public perception. Grindelwald had transformed Blake into a topic of conversation, not as a victim, but as an individual of interest, emphasizing the importance of maintaining a positive image. Upon boarding the train, Blake encountered Cho Chang, who blushed and quickly retreated into an adjacent compartment. Puzzled by her behavior and unable to use legilimency from a distance, Blake chose not to pursue her. Instead, he found an empty compartment, laid out some snacks, and began reviewing his notes on soul magic. Blake's interest in soul magic had grown, especially given his necromancer abilities. His research had advanced significantly over the summer, not only due to his innate understanding of soul magic, but also because of the insights gained from Ravenclaw's crown, or more precisely, the fragment of Voldemort's soul contained within it. This focus on soul magic, particularly on such a potent remnant soul, underscored the depth and complexity of Blake's studies. Horcruxes cannot be destroyed by just any method. They require specific spells or magical items to be eradicated, ensuring the soul within does not escape. During his summer vacation, Blake dedicated his nights to experimenting with Voldemort's Horcrux, utilizing it as a prime resource for his studies in soul magic. Despite the dark nature of his work, Blake considered himself merciful, casting a forgetting curse on Voldemort's soul fragment after each session to erase the torment it endured. Blake, however, would never confess that his true motive was to prevent the soul fragment from dissipating on its own. Blake's rapid progress in soul magic was partly due to his anticipation of encountering another Horcrux at Hogwarts that year, Tom Riddle's diary, created during Voldemort's school years. Blake believed the diary, now likely in Ginny Weasley's possession, contained a piece of Voldemort's soul from his most cunning and persuasive period. Eager to acquire the diary, Blake pondered ways to subtly retrieve it from Ginny. As Blake was lost in thought, Fred and George Weasley burst into the room, exclaiming their joy at seeing him after months apart. Blake, half-jokingly, suggested they were more interested in the snacks he provided than his company, tossing them bags of David's Dragon chili chips. The twins' enthusiastic reaction confirmed their love for the treats, lamenting the long absence of such flavors. Amidst the reunion, Blake noticed a red-haired girl with delicate features standing timidly behind Fred and George. Her shy demeanor and the blush that crept onto her cheeks when Blake's gaze met hers unmistakably identified her as Ginny Weasley. Blake's interest piqued, suspecting the diary to be hidden within her suitcase. Engaging Ginny in conversation, Blake confirmed her identity as the Weasleys' youngest sibling. Fred and George proudly introduced Blake to Ginny, highlighting his heroic acts, including defeating the Dark Wizard Quirrell and his recent accolades mentioned in the newspapers. However, Blake's discomfort grew as his summer adventures, particularly those manipulated by Grindelwald for publicity, were brought up. Despite the twins' curiosity and Hermione's arrival, pressing for details about his vacation in France, Blake firmly refused to discuss it, wishing to avoid the topic altogether. Hermione, undeterred by Blake's reluctance, joined the conversation, placing a thick book on the table and sitting across from him. Blake, trying to evade her probing gaze, insisted there was nothing worth sharing. Yet Hermione's presence and the mention of his recent exploits hinted at a deeper story Blake was hesitant to reveal. Summer vacation had arrived, and the atmosphere among the group was light and teasing. "You don't even have a single letter," one of them exclaimed, poking fun at the lack of romantic correspondence. "I thought you were busy with two infatuated girls," another chimed in, only to be met with awkward glances from Fred and George. The air was thick with the unspoken tension of youthful embarrassment. "Well," Fred and George exchanged knowing looks, both keenly aware of the awkwardness that had suddenly enveloped them. "Blake, we'll head out first," Fred decided, eager to escape the uncomfortable situation. "Yeah, Lee Jordan just told us he discovered something new. Let's go check it out," George added, seizing the opportunity to divert the conversation. That's right, Ginny, why don't you stay here for now? After reading those reports over the summer, you must have plenty of questions for Blake," Fred teased, unable to resist one last jab. Ginny's face flushed with embarrassment, and she shot her brothers a glare. I did not," she protested, her voice a mixture of indignation and embarrassment. "Ahem, time to slip away." Fred and George quickly made their exit, leaving a flustered Ginny behind. "Wait for me, I want to see what's new too," Blake exclaimed, jumping to his feet and hurrying after Fred and George. However, his enthusiasm was short-lived. As Blake turned to leave, he was stopped in his tracks by the sight of Cassandra, her blonde hair catching the light as she stepped into the room. Her expression was one of anger and embarrassment. "Blake, did you tell the reporter what was in that newspaper?" she demanded, her voice trembling with emotion. "You actually said, I had to endure an entire summer of questioning from my dad." Cassandra's cheeks transitioned from pale to a vivid red, a clear sign of her turmoil. Blake could sense her anger, though he wondered if there was a hint of shyness in it as well. Despite the outrageous situation, Blake couldn't help but feel a strong desire to confront Grindelwald for his role in the debacle. Damn it, all he had to do was report the facts. Why did he have to write about those infatuated girls? What was he thinking? Blake's frustration was palpable, but he knew that now was not the time for confrontation. Instead, he needed to find a way to calm Cassandra down and explain the situation. Chapter 235, Ginny's Revelation, the Senior's Unexpected Identity. Blake was momentarily at a loss for words, scratching his head in awkward silence. The carriage had fallen quiet after Cassandra's fiery interrogation, with every eye in the compartment fixed on her. Cassandra's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, realizing too late that her outburst had drawn unwanted attention. It was clear to everyone present that she was one of the two unobservant girls mentioned in the newspaper article, making her question to Blake even more mortifying. Attempting to regain some composure, Cassandra lowered her voice, though her demand for an explanation remained firm. She couldn't back down now, despite the growing embarrassment. Hermione, feigning indifference, continued to flip through her book, sneaking glances at Blake. The little red-haired girl, Ginny, whom Cassandra hadn't noticed before, watched the scene unfold with unabashed curiosity. The carriage was once again enveloped in silence, broken only by the sound of Hermione turning pages. Blake, after a brief moment of surprise, regained his composure. He stepped forward, embracing Cassandra, who was visibly shaking. Whispering in her ear, he said, "I'm sorry. Whether you believe it or not, the story in the newspaper wasn't my intention." Cassandra's body stiffened, her face flushing a deeper shade of red as her temperature seemed to rise noticeably. If it had been colder, Blake mused, steam might have been visible rising from her head. Hermione's eyes widened in shock. This audacity, she thought, witnessing Blake's bold move. Cassandra, too, was taken aback, unable to process the sudden embrace. Blake released Cassandra, inhaling the fresh herbal scent that always seemed to cling to her. Why does she seem so shocked? It's not like we haven't hugged before, he thought, failing to consider that their previous embraces had been in private, without an audience. Ginny, meanwhile, was thrilled by the display, her interest in the unfolding drama unmistakable. She glanced back to see Hermione, who appeared to be reading, though her book was crumpled from her tight grip, a clear sign of her agitation. Ginny's curiosity was piqued. This senior, she thought, her love for gossip igniting. Hogwarts is indeed more interesting than home. Hermione contemplated closing her book and leaving, eager to escape the discomfort of watching the pair. But she realized that doing so would only reveal her true feelings to Blake, something she wasn't prepared to do. Unbeknownst to her, her reactions were already quite telling. Blake continued, seeking to clarify the situation. "You know what we went through those days, don't you?" he asked, to which Cassandra nodded. "Then you might not be aware of what happened after I escorted you home," he added, his expression turning somber. Cassandra's mind raced back to the moment she learned her father had placed a bounty on Blake, using all his private funds. The memory brought a mix of emotions as she recalled Blake's departure and the complex feelings it had stirred within her. Blake had just emerged victorious against thousands of aurors, a feat that had him carrying a bounty of 500,000 galleons on his back, a sum that could drive anyone to madness. In their desperation for the bounty, the aurors had even attacked, disregarding the safety of 2 hostages in the process. Cassandra had pleaded with her father to withdraw the bounty, but due to family complications, there was a delay in its cancellation. During this period, Blake faced countless dangers, a thought that softened Cassandra's heart once more. Hermione, puzzled by the conversation, inquired, "What's happening? It sounds like you had quite the ordeal in France." During the holidays, Hermione had traveled abroad with her parents, and at that time, Blake's bounty was still active, but its influence was mostly confined to France. The Daily Prophet's French edition was the only publication that reported the incident, leaving many outside of France unaware of Blake's characterization as a kidnapper. It wasn't until Grindelwald intervened, taking control of the Daily Prophet, that Blake's heroic deeds were finally acknowledged worldwide. Blake then shared with Hermione the tale of the Otherworld and the events that unfolded upon his return. Cassandra, in disbelief, summarized, "So you're saying that when Professor Dumbledore found you, you were at the French Ministry of Magic's doorstep, having just fended off an attack by the French aurors, and they demanded a hefty compensation from you, yet also awarded you a medal for bravery in secret?" The carriage was enveloped in silence as Blake produced a metal badge, evidence of the bravery award. "Indeed, despite my resistance at the ministry's doors and the embarrassment it caused them, they compensated me and even awarded me this badge," Blake confirmed. Cassandra, piecing together the story, remarked, "So, not only did they fail to humiliate you, but they also compensated you and awarded you badges? Blake continued. They also instructed the Daily Prophet to publish an article rehabilitating my image. And that article, well, it wouldn't have been so exaggerated if it were up to me. But my other guardian, he's quite influential. He hinted at Grindelwald's involvement without naming him directly. Cassandra, recalling the day Dumbledore and Grindelwald departed, and later learning of Grindelwald's identity from her mother, understood the lengths to which he went to protect Blake's reputation. He might have exaggerated the story to prevent any future mislabeling of you as a kidnapper. Though his intentions were good, it felt a bit over the top, she mused, sneaking glances at Blake. Blake, pretending not to hear her subtle admission of not minding the exaggeration, asked, "What was that?" "Nothing," Cassandra quickly replied, diverting the topic. Hermione, still processing Blake's incredible story, focused on the earlier part of his tale. The concept of other worlds and Blake's reckless venture into one filled her with both fear and admiration. "Despite the inaccuracies in the reports, I believe you truly deserve the Medal of Valor," she finally said, acknowledging his bravery. Yeah, Blake's strength and protection were crucial in the other world. Without him, our journey there would have been perilous, Cassandra added, her admiration for Blake evident. Hermione, feeling a mix of emotions, couldn't help but notice Cassandra's overt display of affection towards Blake, her feelings complex and intertwined with the extraordinary tale they had just shared. Hermione was struggling internally, reminding herself to remain calm. I must not let this villain get to me, she thought, trying to convince herself that the slight altercation with Blake was insignificant. After all, she didn't share many classes with him at Hogwarts, so it was easier to avoid further conflict. She focused on regaining her composure. Meanwhile, Blake presented Cassandra with a money bag filled with RMB, explaining it was compensation he had collected for her. If you're planning to study alchemy in the future, you'll definitely need funds, he said, showing a thoughtful side. Cassandra felt a warmth in her heart upon receiving the money, but when she caught Hermione's gaze, she couldn't help but feel a sense of victory, especially recalling the moment she and Blake had shared earlier. Hermione's efforts to maintain her mental fortitude crumbled at the sight of Cassandra's smug expression. The image of Blake and Cassandra embracing flashed through her mind, shattering her calm. In frustration, she accidentally damaged the pages of her book. Blake, noticing the state of Hermione's book, expressed his surprise. Hermione, flustered, quickly made up an excuse about seeing a bug on the page. Blake then attempted to apologize for not writing to her during the holidays, explaining he had been engrossed in studying alchemy with Nicholas Flamel. As a gesture of apology, he offered Hermione a string of crystal-clear beads, which she hesitantly accepted, despite initially refusing. Ginny, observing from the sidelines, noticed a fleeting look of happiness on Hermione's face, a clear sign of her affection for Blake. Ginny's attention was then drawn to Cassandra, who, in a moment of anger, crushed a biscuit in her hand. It became evident to Ginny that Hermione had accepted Blake's gift partly because she noticed Cassandra's annoyance. Ginny's perspective on the situation began to shift. Initially, she had thought Blake was playing with the feelings of both Hermione and Cassandra. However, she started to see his actions in a different light, recognizing them as gestures of genuine friendship rather than romantic advances. This realization led her to question whether Blake's indifferent demeanor was actually a strategic move to maintain harmony among his friends, cleverly avoiding potential conflicts by treating them all equally and with kindness. Ginny couldn't help but marvel at Blake's ability to diffuse the tension between Hermione and Cassandra with simple acts of kindness, shifting their resentment towards each other instead of him. She also pondered the likelihood of Blake having the perfect gift for Hermione by mere coincidence, suspecting he must have prepared in advance. As Ginny continued to analyze Blake's actions, she felt his gaze upon her, causing her to shiver. Despite her initial reservations, she found herself intrigued by the thought of receiving attention from him. Chapter 236, Luna Lovegood. Blake looked at Ginny, a hint of surprise flashing through his heart. Based on his previous impressions, Ginny should have been a simple, shy little girl at this time, the kind who would scream and hide upon seeing her idol, Harry. But now, under Blake's legitimacy, he found this little girl unexpectedly intriguing. Of course, all of this would be completely invisible if one only looked at the surface. Without Blake's legitimacy, it would be impossible to tell that the girl sitting obediently in the chair, shyly sipping snacks, had such a rich mental activity. How, then, did Tom's diary manage to deceive such a clever little girl? In the end, Blake could only attribute it all to the magic of the Horcrux. Horcruxes possess a deceptive magic that can influence the personality of the bearer over time, much like the Supreme Lord of the Rings before Blake purified it. However, the remnant soul in the diary might be much stronger than the one in the crown, which makes sense considering it was Voldemort's first Horcrux. The fragment of the split soul in it was likely the largest of all the Horcruxes. This realization made Blake somewhat eager to acquire the diary himself. With a stronger remnant soul, he could conduct many soul experiments that he had previously hesitated to attempt with the crown's remnant soul. A more resilient remnant soul represented a greater opportunity for research. As Blake pondered these thoughts, Ginny grew increasingly nervous. She couldn't understand why Blake's gaze seemed so intense. "Senior, what's the matter? Why are you looking at me like that? You're not planning to attack me, are you?" But we're under the watchful eyes of the two senior sisters, she thought anxiously. "Ginny, did Harry visit your house over the holiday?" Blake's sudden question startled Ginny out of her frantic thoughts. Ginny responded softly, her shy demeanor in stark contrast to her rich inner monologue. "Did he leave with you?" "Yes, he set out with us. To avoid being late, we even hailed 2 Muggle taxis," Ginny said, becoming gradually more talkative. She found that Blake wasn't as scary as she had imagined. But then she questioned her own thoughts, wondering if this was how people slowly changed their minds. The thought terrified her, and she regarded Blake with a bit more defensiveness and vigilance. Blake, noticing her change in demeanor, couldn't help but feel amused. This little girl's inner drama was indeed rich. His question had been prompted by the knowledge that Harry should not have been able to board the train today. If nothing unexpected occurred, Dobby, the house elf, upon learning of his master's terrible plot, would prevent his most revered Harry Potter from coming to Hogwarts. Consequently, the passage to Platform 9 3/4 would be sealed off, causing Harry and Ronald to miss the train. The possibility of using owls to send letters was completely overlooked, leading them to sneak into Mr. Weasley's Ford and fly to Hogwarts. Upon landing, the Homping Willow severely damaged the car. Blake had no intention of meddling in these matters, but he was keenly interested in the modified Ford. According to reports, the car fled into the Forbidden Forest as if feeling wronged, and later seemed to have rescued Harry and Ronald from Aragog's descendants. This self-aware car was incredibly fascinating and a testament to Mr. Weasley's magical modifications. For Blake, who was constantly researching magical battle puppets, this car was worthy of study. "So, did you see them getting into the car?" Blake inquired. Ginny, reminded of the morning's events, realized she hadn't seen Harry or her brother Ronald on the platform. She peered out, noting that the train had not yet departed, but Harry and Ronald were nowhere to be found. I didn't see them," she admitted, her curiosity piqued by Blake's line of questioning. "Maybe they're already in the car," Ginny mused, not having considered the possibility that they weren't. It wasn't her fault, really. After all, Harry and Ron were supposed to follow her into the passage. Who could have anticipated that house elves could manipulate the tunnel? Caught up in the excitement of finally returning to school, Ginny hadn't noticed the absence of her 2 friends. "Oh, is that so?" Blake inquired, his tone casual, yet laced with a hint of authority that came from his extensive knowledge. He sighed in relief, having failed to spot Harry and Ron on the train. This was a good sign. If they couldn't get in, they would likely resort to driving the car. And driving the car meant it would end up in the Forbidden Forest in a fit of rage. Blake couldn't help but feel a thrill at the thought. It saved him the trouble of concocting an excuse to visit the Weasleys to see the car. However, as Blake's excitement grew, Ginny became increasingly uneasy, noticing the intensity of Blake's gaze. She feared she had become the target of the upperclassman's dubious intentions. Meanwhile, Blake was lost in thoughts of retrieving the car from the forbidden forest when he suddenly felt a sharp squeeze on his waist. "Ouch! Cassandra, what are you doing?" he exclaimed. "How can you stare at a young girl and laugh so wickedly?" Cassandra rebuked him, clearly annoyed. Caught off guard, Blake felt his cheeks flush under the scrutinizing eyes of Cassandra and Hermione. He hastened to clarify, "Ahem, I'm sorry, Ginny. I was just lost in thought and didn't realize how it looked." Ginny, however, was not reassured by his explanation. If anything, she felt more convinced of his ill intentions. Seeking an escape, she muttered, "Ahem, I'm going to step out for a bit," and moved away. Feeling awkward, Blake quickly exited the compartment and left the train, only to bump into a familiar face. "Hey, Blake," greeted Bob, a large, friendly figure. "Bob, it's been a while. How have you been?" Blake responded warmly. After a brief exchange, Bob apologized for not being able to fulfill a promise, but mentioned he had another gift for Blake, one that might be a bit challenging. Curious, Blake followed Bob to a secluded corner, where Bob revealed a creature hidden in his magically expanded backpack. It was a small, black and white animal, slightly larger than a cat, with a fierce gaze. Blake, intrigued, prepared to introduce himself to the creature, but was interrupted by a mysterious voice advising caution. Turning around, he saw a young girl with long, unkempt white hair who warned him about the animal's vengeful nature. Blake, intrigued by the girl's sudden appearance and the mysterious creature, realized this encounter might lead to an unexpected adventure. Luna's gaze briefly lingered on the peculiar necklace adorning the boy's neck, a silent acknowledgement of his identity. "Don't worry, I'll handle this," Blake assured confidently. The honey badger, notorious for its ferocity and vengeful nature, was often referred to as the Flathead. Yet for Blake, this was no daunting challenge. He, too, was known among his peers as a flat-headed brother, a title he wore with a mix of pride and irony. After declaring his intent, Blake nonchalantly reached his hand into the enclosure. Luna let out a soft sigh. Her warnings, as usual, seemed to fall on deaf ears. She had grown accustomed to being overlooked, her words drifting into the void, unheeded. If the boy chose not to heed her advice, she would let him be. After all, she had done her part by issuing a warning, hadn't she? Despite her resignation, Luna couldn't help but prepare for the inevitable. She rummaged through her small satchel, retrieving a roll of magical bandages. She was certain that Blake's intrusion would provoke the honey badger, resulting in a painful bite. It was best to be prepared. However, as she anticipated the forthcoming chaos, Luna's eyes widened in disbelief. The once unruly honey badger was now being cradled obediently in Blake's arms. The scene before her was astonishing. It was as if the creature had recognized a kindred spirit, or more aptly, had met the alpha of its pack. Quietly, it turned the magical bandages to her satchel, her mind racing with questions. You smell terrible. I'll give you a bath once we're back at school," Blake remarked, affectionately patting the honey badger's head. The creature, in turn, tilted its head slightly, as if cautious not to harm Blake with its coarse fur. "May I touch it?" Luna inquired softly, her curiosity piqued. The honey badger responded with a fierce roar, its instinctual defense mechanism kicking in. However, its aggression was swiftly curtailed by a firm tap on the head from Blake. "Don't be rude," he chided. Subdued, the honey badger ceased its growling. Instead, it opened its mouth towards Luna in an odd gesture that seemed almost like a smile. "Is he smiling?" Luna's eyes sparkled with wonder as she asked, her voice laced with intrigue and amusement. Chapter 237, A Stroll and a New Friend. Blake eyed the flat-headed creature before him, its grin puzzling. "How can you tell it's smiling?" he asked, genuinely curious. Given his status as an archdruid, Blake possessed an exceptional sensitivity to the natural world, yet even he found it challenging to discern the creature's expression. To the untrained eye, the flat-headed creature's bared teeth could easily be mistaken for a threatening gesture rather than a smile. "It's about the emotions," Luna explained, kneeling to gently stroke the honey badger's head, despite its apparent annoyance. "I sensed no hostility from it. When a creature like this shows no aggression, perhaps its actions could be interpreted as laughter." Blake found Luna's explanation surprisingly logical. "Can you differentiate between joy and anger in its emotions?" he inquired. Luna shook her head. I can only detect the presence or absence of hostility. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I thought you might have that ability, Blake said with a laugh. How did you guess I could sense it? I just had a feeling, Luna replied, her voice ethereal as ever. Your instincts are accurate. I'm Blake Green, by the way. You can call me Blake, he introduced himself, extending his right hand. Luna blinked, then shook his hand. Luna Lovegood, first year. I'm not sure where I'll be sorted, but I'm guessing Ravenclaw since both my parents were. Blake repacked the badger into his suitcase. Ravenclaw is a great house, Luna. May I call you that? I have 2 close friends from Ravenclaw, but I think after tonight I'll have another. Luna smiled. Then I'm happy to say my first friend at Hogwarts is a Hufflepuff. Blake then effortlessly helped Luna with her suitcase onto the train, leaving Bob in a daze. Bob was accustomed to Blake's circle of friends being predominantly female, so he simply picked up his backpack and headed towards the Hogwarts Express. As the train began its journey, Cassandra and Hermione sat in silence, their expressions neutral, but their emotions complex. Ginny, meanwhile, couldn't hide her fascination with the unfolding drama. She found Blake's ability to make new friends, particularly female ones, intriguing. Ginny observed Luna, noting her peculiar appearance. Luna's serene smile and distant gaze, as if she were looking through or beyond her surroundings, were particularly striking. Her attire was ordinary, but her accessories, a necklace resembling a bottle cork and a pair of rabbit earrings, were decidedly unconventional. When Luna introduced herself to the group, Ginny felt a sense of camaraderie with her fellow first year. I'm Ginny Weasley, also a first year. I met Blake today through my brothers, she shared. Luna then turned her attention to Cassandra and Hermione. Hermione, despite her frustrations with Blake, greeted Luna warmly. Hello, I'm Hermione Granger. Cassandra introduced herself next. I am Cassandra Worley, surprising Hermione with her openness, a departure from her usual aloof demeanor. Hermione wondered at Cassandra's uncharacteristic friendliness, while Cassandra simply met her gaze, aware of the curiosity she had sparked. Hermione couldn't decipher Cassandra's thoughts, but she noticed Cassandra's favorable attitude towards Luna, leading her to believe Luna was the key to the situation. When Blake returned to the compartment, he was met with a surprising scene of lively conversation, contrary to his expectation of finding anger. Blake, puzzled, observed them engrossed in a book discussion, with only Luna and Ginny acknowledging his presence, while Cassandra and Hermione seemed to ignore him. Curiosity piqued, Blake moved closer to discover the subject of their fascination, only to realize they were discussing Gilderoy Lockhart's exploits as detailed in Wandering with Werewolves. Ginny's admiration for Lockhart's bravery in a hypothetical situation involving a werewolf and a phone booth sparked a conversation about the merits of Lockhart's problem-solving skills. Hermione agreed, praising Lockhart's calmness under pressure, while Cassandra, noticing Blake's discomfort, added her admiration for Lockhart's supposed strength and confidence. Luna concurred, and Cassandra hinted at their anticipation of learning from Lockhart, the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Blake's mood soured at the mention of Lockhart, internally criticizing Lockhart's practice of claiming others' heroic deeds as his own after erasing their memories. Despite his disdain for Lockhart's ethics, Blake composed himself, recognizing Cassandra's attempt to provoke him. He then chose to sit next to Hermione, causing a visible reaction from Cassandra, who crushed a biscuit in her hand, and Hermione, who was visibly surprised by Blake's proximity. The conversation shifted as Blake mentioned his observation of fewer students on the train, indirectly referencing the competition Hogwarts faced from Nurmengard, a school believed to offer powerful magical education. Luna shared that she had received admission letters from both schools, highlighting the allure of Nurmengard to many students. This revelation sparked a discussion on the choices facing young witches and wizards, with Luna's mention of her father's cautionary words about Nurmengard playing with fire, leaving an ominous note hanging in the air. Throughout this exchange, the dynamics within the group revealed underlying tensions, alliances, and the impact of external factors, such as the reputation of educational institutions on their decisions and relationships. There is no safer school in the world than the one under Dumbledore's watch, Blake mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. This revelation came as a bit of a surprise to him. Initially, he had assumed that due to Grindelwald's notorious reputation, the school would struggle to open its doors, let alone attract any students. Yet, the reality appeared to be quite the opposite. Despite the numerous individuals who harbored enmity towards Grindelwald, there seemed to be an even greater number who admired him. This admiration was the only plausible explanation for how Grindelwald's influence had managed to sweep across Europe so effectively, to the point where even the Aurors laying siege to him found themselves swayed by his charisma. It was for this reason that upon his capture, the Magical Congress of the United States of America had resorted to the extreme measure of severing his tongue, fearing that otherwise he might even incite a rebellion among the Aurors within the prison walls. Lost in these thoughts, Blake was brought back to the present by Ginny's question. "Blake, you mentioned earlier that you were going to look for Harry and Ronald outside. Did you manage to find them?" "Oh," Blake spread his hands in a gesture of defeat. "I didn't find them in the carriages. Clearly, they didn't board the train." "Huh?" Ginny looked puzzled. "Why didn't they get on the train?" Blake offered her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, it's not a big deal. Taking the train to school is more about honoring tradition than necessity. They're not foolish. If they simply send a letter to the school via owl, the school will undoubtedly arrange for their pickup. But what if they've run into some minor trouble?" He added thoughtfully. "Of course, even if it doesn't occur to them to use an owl, they can just wait. Once your parents leave the platform, they'll quickly realize that the boys didn't board the train. Then your parents will surely find a way to get them to school. I highly doubt they'd resort to any illicit methods to reach school." Blake's voice trailed off as Ginny's gaze shifted to the window, her expression one of utter disbelief. "Ah, those two imbeciles!" she exclaimed. Blake turned to see what had caught her attention and was just in time to witness a Ford Anglia soaring through the sky. At the car's window, Harry and Ronald could be seen, smiling and waving at the train. The scene unfolding before them was both absurd and amusing, a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of magic and the lengths to which it goes. Old inspire even the most unconventional solutions to seemingly mundane problems. Chapter 238, Dumbledore, Where Are My Students? "Wow," Blake turned to Ginny with an expression of genuine admiration. "It's quite impressive, really. Transforming a discarded Muggle vehicle into a high-speed car is nothing short of cool, and the technical challenges it presents are fascinating. For instance, how did Mr. Weasley manage the energy conversion?" Seeing Blake's excitement, Ginny blushed, a hint of pride in her voice. "My father modified it in secret." Blake's enthusiasm waned slightly as he considered the implications. "This could be problematic," he mused. "Your father works in the Office for the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts, doesn't he?" Ginny nodded in confirmation. "If this gets out, he could be in serious trouble." Ginny's eyes widened with concern. I hope it remains unseen." Blake shook his head, sitting back down. He then pulled out a pen and a piece of parchment. "The truth is, if we could spot it, then it's likely to have been seen on its journey here from King's Cross Station in London." Ginny remembered a key feature. The car is supposed to have an invisibility function. Peering out the window, Blake noted the car speeding into a cloud. Clearly, the invisibility function isn't working, or we wouldn't be able to see it. Ginny frowned, worried. Meanwhile, Blake began to write on the parchment. "What are you writing?" Hermione inquired, curiosity piqued. "I'm drafting a letter," Blake replied, his pen moving swiftly across the paper. "To inform Mr. Weasley?" Hermione guessed. "No, he's probably realized the car is missing by now. Writing to him wouldn't change anything." Blake finished the letter, and Hermione was surprised to see Gellert Grindelwald signed at the bottom. "I know someone who can handle this situation," Blake explained. "And frankly, the law against the misuse of Muggle artifacts seems overly restrictive. We should regulate the modification of Muggle items, not outright ban them. After all, isn't the Hogwarts Express itself a modified Muggle invention? I doubt wizards could have created trains from scratch." Blake then produced a large owl from his pocket, leaving Luna and Ginny in awe. The owl, with a defiant look, seemed unlike any ordinary owl. "Deliver this," Blake instructed, and the owl took the letter in its beak and flew out of the carriage, Blake saw this as an opportunity to address a broader issue. The wizarding world's standard of living hadn't evolved in centuries, largely due to prohibitions on integrating Muggle technology. Such restrictions, he felt, were short-sighted and stifling innovation. Traveling at speed is far more comfortable than on a broomstick, Blake mused. And if the concern is about being seen by Muggles, isn't adopting Muggle methods and blending in a better way to maintain the international statute of wizarding secrecy? Hermione relayed Blake's actions to Ginny, who turned to him with heartfelt gratitude. "Thank you, Blake, for helping my dad." "It's the least I could do," Blake responded, "but you should also write to your father to prepare him." Ginny nodded, then hesitated. I don't have an owl." The financial constraints of the Weasley family were no secret, with many mouths to feed and not enough to go around. Despite being dearly loved, Ginny's wish for an owl of her own was a luxury they couldn't afford. In the Weasley household, only Percy had received a new owl, a reward for his achievements. Blake's gesture not only aimed to solve an immediate problem, but also highlighted the potential for progress and understanding between the worlds of magic and Muggle innovation. After being appointed a prefect, Hermione offered, "Use mine." Outside platform 9 3/4, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were puzzled by the absence of their car in the parking space. "Where's my car? How can such a large car just disappear?" Mrs. Weasley wondered aloud if it could have been stolen. Mr. Weasley, alarmed, exclaimed, "Oh my God, if it's stolen, I'll be dismissed from the Ministry of Magic." Just then, a peculiar owl swooped in. Mr. Weasley, noticing no one was paying attention, retrieved a letter from the owl's beak. "Oh, it's a letter from Ginny." After reading it, he sighed in relief. "Ah, that's a relief. The car wasn't stolen by Muggles. Then why is it missing?" Mrs. Weasley inquired. "It was taken by Ronald and Harry," Mr. Weasley explained, reading from the letter. "They drove the car above the Hogwarts Express and followed the train." "Eh? What did you say?" Mrs. Weasley was beside herself with worry. "That's even worse than having it stolen by a Muggle." Mr. Weasley's hands trembled as he held the letter. "Molly, please, calm down. Calm down. That's a flying car. If the Ministry finds out, think about the consequences," she whispered urgently, mindful of their surroundings. "As the director of the Office for the Prohibition of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts, you're supposed to prevent such breaches of the law," she continued, her voice laced with concern. You could end up in Azkaban," she warned. "I've told you before, stop tampering with these Muggle things." Mr. Weasley listened, disheartened by his wife's admonitions. "What are we going to do now?" he wondered aloud. "Didn't you amend the law against the misuse of Muggle objects? Didn't you create loopholes for yourself? Then find a way to expand those loopholes, at least to cover up this incident," Mrs. Weasley suggested. "Oh, that's right." Mr. Weasley quickly set off, determined to find a solution. Meanwhile, the Hogwarts Express journeyed for 6 hours, and as night fell, it neared Hogsmeade Station. The Ford car was no longer visible, leading Blake to speculate that it might have encountered a glitch and couldn't keep up with the train. Blake was soon ushered out of the compartment as the girls began to change into their school uniforms. Standing outside, Blake tapped his casual clothes, which magically transformed into the Hogwarts school uniform. If someone could invent clothes that change automatically, they could make a fortune, Blake mused. As the train slowed, Blake disembarked with a smaller crowd than usual, noting that not all were first-year students heading to Nurmengard Academy of Magic. Many were high school transfers. Hagrid's booming voice soon filled the air, directing the first years and guiding the older students to a different path. Blake, along with Luna and Ginny, bid farewell before heading in the opposite direction of the first years. Unlike the newcomers, who were to take boats to the castle, second-year students like Blake were to ride in horse-drawn carriages pulled by thestrals, mysterious creatures visible only to those who have witnessed death firsthand. This was Blake's first encounter with a thestral, a creature with a dragon-like head, bat-like wings, and a skeletal body, exuding an eerie aura. No wonder they were once considered a symbol of bad luck. As Blake stared in fascination, the thestral seemed to notice his gaze, stirring with a sense of curiosity. As the carriage neared, it neighed, prompting Blake to step inside. He reached out, his hand brushing against its skeletal frame before he hoisted himself into the vehicle. Hermione, puzzled, inquired, "What were you doing?" "There was nothing there." "That's a thestral. You can't see it," Cassandra explained. "Can you see it?" Hermione asked, skepticism lacing her voice. "I can't see it either," Cassandra admitted. "Only those who have witnessed death can see such creatures." Hermione's eyes widened in shock, then shifted towards Blake, who had just climbed into the carriage. The look in Blake's eyes a moment ago suggested he could indeed see the thestrals. This revelation led Hermione to a startling conclusion. Blake had seen death. She wanted to probe further, but found herself at a loss for words. Blake, meanwhile, turned his gaze out the window, unwilling to delve into the reasons behind his ability to see thestrals. He couldn't disclose that his sight was granted by a grim encounter where he had to confront and defeat several purifiers. Upon their arrival at Hogwarts, Blake noted the familiar setup of the Great Hall, though it was markedly less crowded than in previous years. The Slytherin section, in particular, had a noticeable number of vacant seats. About 1/3 were empty. Blake had his suspicions about their whereabouts, and it seemed Dumbledore was aware as well, his expression clouded with concern. Blake couldn't help but wonder if Dumbledore had been invited to the opening ceremony at Nurmengard. Having spent the entire summer at Nicholas Flamel's residence, Blake was out of the loop on recent events. The evening proceeded as usual, starting with the sorting ceremony, followed by the headmaster's speech, and then the feast. Luna was sorted into Ravenclaw, while Ginny joined Gryffindor. As Blake was enjoying his meal, he noticed Snape entering the hall, a rare look of delight on his face. Snape quickly whisked Professor McGonagall away, and shortly after, Dumbledore also exited the hall. Blake surmised that the arrival of Harry and Ron was the cause of Snape's unusual joy, believing that Harry, whom Snape loathed, would finally be expelled. In the midst of these developments, Professor Sprout entered the hall, her expression fraught with concern. "Blake, I need your assistance," she said urgently. "What's the matter?" Blake asked. "The Homping Willow has been severely damaged. I need someone to help me address this," she explained. Blake's evening had taken an unexpected turn, signaling the start of yet another unpredictable year at Hogwarts. Chapter 239, Lockhart, Are You Serious? When Professor Sprout requested his assistance, Blake had no reason to refuse. The Homping Willow had sustained serious injuries, and it seemed that Sprout's method of treatment involved applying a sort of bandage to the tree. Understanding the complexity of the task, Blake readily agreed to help and followed Professor Sprout outside. As they walked, Professor Sprout explained, "I didn't want to interrupt your meal, but the Homping Willow is in considerable pain. Despite its appearance, this species isn't as resilient as one might think. It's more akin to an animal than a plant in many ways. A broken branch might be a minor issue for other trees, but for the Homping Willow, it's a significant injury. This tree has a unique defense mechanism, attacking anything that moves near it. Whether this is due to intelligence or instinct is debatable. However, its protective capabilities are undeniable, though it does have a vulnerability, a spot on its trunk that acts like a switch, rendering it immobile when pressed." Blake found the comparison to a legendary treant intriguing. The treatment seemed straightforward. Reattach the broken branch and secure it with a bandage, allowing the tree's natural healing process to take over. This healing ability was something no animal could match. Upon reaching the Homping Willow, they found the area illuminated by bright torches. The sight of thick branches scattered around and the tree's trembling form was a clear indication of its distress. As an archdruid, Blake was particularly sensitive to the emotions of living beings, and he could feel the tree's pain and anger. Although his expertise was more with animals than plants, the strong sense of self-awareness emanating from the Homping Willow was unlike anything he had encountered in other plants. "It looks to be in pain," Professor Sprout remarked, indicating that their task might be more challenging than anticipated. Blake conjured several balls of light with his wand, brightening the area significantly more than the torches had. "Well done, Blake," Professor Sprout commended, now able to see the extent of the damage more clearly. They began their work by reattaching the larger branches first. Professor Sprout deactivated the tree's defensive mechanism by hitting the special spot on its trunk, giving them 15 minutes to work without disturbance. With a bundle of bandages, procured from Madame Pomfrey on short notice, they focused on the most significant injuries first. Blake approached the base of the whomping willow, placing his palm on one of its branches to assess the damage more closely. Although he had been near the tree before, this was his first time examining it with such attention to detail. After evaluating the situation, he turned to see Professor Sprout preparing the bandages, ready to begin the healing process. Their efforts that night were a testament to the care and respect the Hogwarts staff had for all living beings within their care, demonstrating the importance of compassion and expertise in the magical world. In Professor Sprout's grasp was a peculiar plant, and she was about to receive assistance from Blake when they were suddenly interrupted by an overly enthusiastic voice. "Oh, dear Pomona, do you require assistance?" The voice belonged to none other than Gilderoy Lockhart, a wizard of considerable charm, with flowing blonde hair and a spotless turquoise robe. Despite Professor Sprout's slight irritation at Lockhart's informal use of her first name, she recognized him as a new colleague, and based on his published works, an experienced wizard who might indeed offer valuable help. "It would be wonderful if you could assist," Professor Sprout replied with a polite smile. Lockhart, ever pleased with himself, eagerly responded, "Of course. How could the ever-enthusiastic Lockhart refuse a colleague's request? And I have encountered a few of these strange plants in my travels. Fear not, I will demonstrate how to heal the whomping willow." He then noticed Blake and dead, somewhat condescendingly, "Oh, of course, I wouldn't want your young student to think I'm more skilled in herbology than his professor." Before Lockhart could continue, Professor Sprout's expression darkened. She found his excessive chatter and lack of modesty off-putting, especially his insinuation that he could outperform her in front of her students. At this moment, Blake, sensing an opportunity, stepped forward. With a tone of admiration, he addressed Lockhart. "You are the legendary pioneer against dark magic, the 5-time winner of the Wizard Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award, recipient of the Order of Merlin, 3rd class, the legendary wizard Gilderoy Lockhart. It's an honor to have you as our Defense Against the Dark Arts professor this year." Blake then enthusiastically shook Lockhart's hand, leaving the latter flattered but slightly overwhelmed by the vigorous handshake. "Ahem. Since Professor Lockhart is so eager to assist, let's begin without further delay," Professor Sprout interjected, eager to move on. She explained that striking the whomping willow's scar would immobilize it for 15 minutes, but Lockhart's interruption had already cost them precious time. Blake, seizing the moment, said, "Professor Lockhart, didn't you mention you'd show us how to treat the whomping willow? We're eager to learn." Professor Sprout paused, curious to see if Lockhart's expertise matched his boasts. Lockhart, caught off guard by the challenge, stiffened. He had intended merely to bask in the adulation of his colleagues and perhaps embellish his contributions. His initial plan was to offer superficial help while seeking opportunities to showcase his supposed brilliance. As the group approached the whomping willow, all eyes were on Lockhart, waiting to see if his actions would live up to his grandiose claims. Professor Sprout, while skeptical, remained open to the possibility that Lockhart might surprise them with genuine skill. Blake watched with interest, keen to learn not just about herbology, but also about the character of their new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. Gilderoy Lockhart, with a mix of bravado and desperation, announced he knew of spells that could heal the whomping willow. His plan was simple: claim credit for the healing, bask in the glory, and inflate his already sizable ego. However, the reality was starkly different from his grandiose vision. Professors Blake and Sprout had no intention of intervening themselves, leaving Lockhart to face the task alone, a scenario he hadn't anticipated. "Ahem. Okay, Lockhart declared, trying to mask his reluctance. He brandished his wand, asserting, "I happen to know some magic spells that can work on this peculiar plant." He quickly added a disclaimer. "Of course, every unique plant has its peculiarities. It's perfectly normal if the spell doesn't work." This was Lockhart's escape route, a way to deflect blame from his incompetence to the supposed uniqueness of the whomping willow. Approaching the tree with feigned confidence, Lockhart waved his wand and chanted a nonsensical spell, Ulala Callista Kashnabara. Professor Blake watched, dumbfounded. The spell, predictably, had no effect on the Humping Willow. Just as Lockhart was about to fabricate an excuse, he felt a chill on his neck, followed by the whoosh of a massive branch narrowly missing his head. Panic replaced his earlier bravado, and he realized the gravity of his situation. The Humping Willow, already agitated from its injuries, was not going to let him off easily. Professor Sprout, initially swayed by Blake's exaggerated praise of Lockhart, began to doubt her judgment when Lockhart was violently struck by a branch and sent tumbling into the mud. It was then she noticed Blake struggling to suppress a smirk, and the pieces fell into place. Blake's flattery was not genuine admiration, but a setup, anticipating Lockhart's failure. The realization dawned on Sprout that if Lockhart truly possessed the skill he boasted of, he would have navigated the situation effortless, sly. However, his failure served as a stark lesson in humility. Lockhart's hasty retreat under the Humping Willow's assault was not the demonstration of magical prowess he had promised, but a spectacle of his own incompetence. In the end, the incident with the Humping Willow revealed more than just Lockhart's lack of magical ability. It exposed the folly of vanity and the value of genuine skill over empty boasting. Lockhart's arrogance was palpable, even in the face of his recent humiliation. He had been flung just beyond the reach of the Humping Willow's wrath. His once pristine golden hair was now disheveled, and his spotless wizard robe was reduced to tatters. Struggling to his feet, he cleared his throat and attempted to salvage some dignity. Ahem, indeed, every plant has its own unique characteristics, he proclaimed. The spell I cast was merely a wake-up call. Had it been the tree I encountered in the Amazon, I would have healed it by now. I'll need to return to my research. Rest assured, I'll devise a solution for this tree by tomorrow. Ahem. Blake couldn't help but think that even in death, Lockhart's mouth would be the last part of him to cease its endless prattle. Despite the beating they had just endured, his arrogance remained unscathed. Professor Sprout sighed, about to interject, but Blake was already kneeling before Lockhart. You still intend to go back and find a solution? He asked. I must. Without further research, I'm at a loss, Lockhart replied, his stubbornness evident. But if I can cure it right now, why would you need to go back and study it further? Blake challenged. Didn't you want to demonstrate your method to us? Was all that time spent just to demonstrate it incorrectly? Lockhart's face flushed with embarrassment. No, I merely underestimated the situation, he stammered. Blake spread his hands in a gesture of offering. Let me show you how it's done. Approaching the still agitated Humping Willow, Blake moved with caution. Blake, be careful, Professor Sprout warned. The tree had not yet calmed, and approaching it seemed like a foolhardy endeavor. However, what happened next was nothing short of miraculous. As Blake neared, the Humping Willow's thrashing branches began to slow, eventually coming to a complete stop. He placed one hand on the tree's trunk, and with his wand in the other, he gestured gracefully. Broken branches levitated, drifting back towards the tree. In the blink of an eye, the branches reattached themselves to the trunk, accompanied by 10 bursts of green light. It was as if time had reversed, the branches mending seamlessly back into place. Blake stepped back, the Humping Willow fully restored, as if it had never been damaged. The transformation was so complete, it was as though the tree's earlier disheveled state had been an illusion. Clapping his hands together, Blake turned to his audience, a satisfied smile on his face. Just in time for the last dessert at the dinner party, he declared, his work complete. Chapter 240, Blake and the Humping Willow. Ding! 2 shocked emotions detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving 2 silver treasure chests. Blake gently patted the trunk of the Humping Willow. Contrary to its usual aggressive behavior, the tree did not lash out at Blake. Instead, a slender branch tenderly descended, resting on Blake's shoulder as a red flower slowly blossomed at its tip, a silent gesture of gratitude for Blake's intervention. Professor Sprout watched the scene unfold with disbelief, her prepared bandages now unnecessary. She glanced at Lockhart, who lay on the ground, struggling to lift his head, his expression one of utter disbelief. However, upon catching Sprout's gaze, he quickly masked his astonishment with a forced smile. "Look, the spell I cast seems to have worked after all," Lockhart claimed, attempting to salvage some dignity. "It's just that its effects might be delayed due to individual differences." Professor Sprout frowned, unimpressed by Lockhart's shameless attempt to take credit for the Homping Willow's recovery, which was clearly Blake's doing. Dismissing Lockhart's claim, she approached Blake, her curiosity piqued by the miraculous healing she had just witnessed. She was eager to learn how Blake had managed to heal the Homping Willow in such an extraordinary manner. "Ahem, dear Pomona, could you perhaps assist me first?" Lockhart pleaded from the ground, his body racked with pain from his earlier collision with the Homping Willow, which had likely resulted in several broken bones. "I believe, as a legendary wizard with such extensive adventuring experience, you wouldn't need help from others, right?" Professor Sprout retorted with a smile, leaving Lockhart without assistance. Lockhart's attempt to move resulted in a sharp pain, his face turning pale. Meanwhile, Professor Sprout cautiously approached the Homping Willow, which, to her surprise, did not attack her. "What an incredible ability, Blake. How did you manage to do that?" she asked, genuinely amazed. "I've never been able to get this close to a Whomping Willow while fully awake." "Hasn't magic always been this amazing?" Blake responded with a modest smile. "You're right, Blake. Magic is indeed wondrous," Professor Sprout agreed, attributing Blake's unique ability to his natural magical talent, unaware of the concept of druids and their ability to enhance healing magic. Their conversation was interrupted by Lockhart's exclamation of horror. Turning their attention to him, they saw his left arm flailing limply, devoid of bones, a result of the bone-drawing curse he had inadvertently cast on himself. Blake approached with a curious smile. "Professor, what spell is this? Could you teach it to me?" he asked sincerely. Lockhart, taken aback by Blake's request and unsure of his intentions, hesitated. You want to learn this?" "Yes, I want to understand it," Blake insisted, eager to learn. Lockhart, unable to admit the spell's effects were accidental, found himself in a difficult position. "If I master this spell, cooking will become so much easier for me," exclaimed Blake with genuine enthusiasm. Lockhart, however, could barely conceal his disdain. "Cooking? You've learned this spell just for cooking?" he thought, mistakenly interpreting Blake's sincerity for sarcasm. Yet, Blake was earnest in his statement. He truly believed that the spell Lockhart had inadvertently used could revolutionize cooking, such as effortlessly deboning fish or poultry. Despite having been mentored by several Dark Lords and being well-versed in numerous dark and sinister spells, Blake found this particular spell fascinating for its benign application. Unlike the dark magic he was accustomed to, this spell could delicately separate bone from flesh with remarkable precision and without causing pain. This realization struck him as nothing short of genius. At the time, Professor Sprout was busy with the Whomping Willow, allowing Blake the opportunity to learn the bone spell from Lockhart. He quickly understood its magical properties, especially its ability to remove bones without inflicting pain. Had Lockhart not been spared the agony by the spell's immediate healing effect after mistakenly attempting a healing spell, he would have been in unbearable pain due to the loss of all bones in his arm. Upon discovering the spell's true potential, Blake was eager to demonstrate its healing capabilities. When Professor Sprout suggested seeking medical attention for Lockhart, Blake intervened, offering to apply the Bone Spirit spell as a token of gratitude for the accidental lesson. Placing his hand on Lockhart's arm, Blake activated the spell, causing Lockhart to experience a brief, intense pain as his bones were magically restored, followed by immediate relief. Lockhart was astonished to find his arm fully healed, functionality restored as if by magic. "Amazing. Can you actually heal people?" Professor Sprout asked, visibly impressed. Blake modestly replied, "Yes, I've had some success with both plants and animals. In fact, I've previously used this method to treat my dog, Era." Lockhart, though initially taken aback by Blake's straightforwardness, couldn't help but feel grateful. Thanks to Blake's intervention, he wouldn't miss his first Defense Against the Dark Arts class, an opportunity he was eagerly anticipating. Upon Blake's return to the castle, he discovered he had missed the end of the dinner party, including the dessert. However, he learned from fellow students that the atmosphere had been unusually somber, with Professor Dumbledore appearing particularly disheartened. The dinner had concluded early, and even the customary singing of the school song had been nearly skipped. Blake surmised that the cause of Dumbledore's mood wasn't related to any minor incident, such as Ron's unconventional arrival at school. Instead, he speculated that the significant loss of students to Nurmengard's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, with many upperclassmen transferring out, had deeply affected Dumbledore, especially noticeable during the dinner where the absence of students was starkly evident. Blake couldn't help but marvel at the peculiar sense of happiness that filled his heart. He surmised that Grindelwald must have flaunted something to Dumbledore, causing the usually guarded headmaster to momentarily lower his defenses. If anyone can get Dumbledore to let his guard down, it's that old man, Blake thought to himself. That evening, he felt no urgency to search for the Ford Anglia. He knew it would always be somewhere in the Forbidden Forest. Upon returning to his dormitory, he greeted his roommates, who were preoccupied with playing with Dabao before succumbing to sleep. The next morning, after a restful night, Blake quietly left Dabao, who was still nestled comfortably in his bed, undisturbed. After freshening up, he made his way to the Great Hall, which appeared unchanged from the previous year. The enchanted ceiling above mirrored the sky outside, creating the illusion of dining in the open air. The tables of the four houses were laden with breakfast items, including plates of pickled herring and heaps of bread, which did little to appeal to Blake's appetite. The only item he found remotely palatable was the porridge. However, Blake was not one to settle. Tapping on the table, he requested, "I'd like 10 puffs, please." Instantly, a plate containing exactly 10 puffs materialized in front of him. "Well, at least I won't have to compromise on dessert," he mused. Cedric, who was sitting next to him, couldn't help but comment, "Aren't you worried about gaining weight, eating something so sweet this early?" "Gaining weight? That's the least of my concerns. What's the point of breakfast if you can't indulge in a bit of sugar?" Blake retorted. "You said the same thing at lunch," Cedric pointed out, stirring his porridge, his tone teasing, yet revealing a hint of envy. "Cedric, you've changed. Your words have grown sharper," Blake observed. "Sharp? I'm simply envious," Cedric exclaimed, his expression a mix of jest and genuine frustration. "I've seen the articles about you, the heartthrob, the charmer. Why is it that despite being taller and, in my opinion, more handsome than you, I don't receive the same attention?" Blake shook his head, ready to engage in their usual banter. "You may be taller, I'll give you that, but more handsome? Now that's debatable." Their playful argument was interrupted by the arrival of a large flock of owls, delivering the morning post. The two quickly shielded their breakfasts from the potential mess. Experience had taught them that these deliveries could easily result in unwanted additions to their meals. Once the owls had departed, Blake retrieved the plate of puffs and began to read the copy of the Daily Prophet that had been delivered to him. The front page featured a large photo of Grindelwald, along with headlines celebrating the opening of Nurmengard Academy of Magic and praising Grindelwald's inaugural speech. Further articles detailed a shocking development, an overnight exodus of students from Hogwarts to Nurmengard, with Professor Wetterothier of Nurmengard claiming responsibility for the incident. Even the British Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, had sent a congratulatory message to the new school. As Blake flipped through the newspaper, he couldn't help but notice the excessive coverage of Nurmengard. Grindelwald's control over the Daily Prophet was evident, with the publication lavishing praise upon the new academy. Controlling the media to sing your praises is one thing, Blake thought, but this blatant self-promotion and disparagement of others is quite another. As Blake stepped into Hogwarts, he had a hunch that Dumbledore's breakfast that morning might have lacked its usual flavor. This thought crossed his mind just as he gratefully accepted a cup of milk tea from Nagini. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the Gryffindor table, quickly followed by a thunderous noise that filled the entire hall. "Stealing a car! I wouldn't be surprised if they sacked you." Mrs. Weasley's voice boomed, easily 100 times louder than normal, through a howler. "Just wait until I deal with you." You probably haven't even considered how your father and I felt when we discovered the car was missing." At the Gryffindor table, both Harry and Ron hung their heads in shame. "It's so frustrating. Your father will be under scrutiny at work," the Howler continued. "It's all your fault. If you don't start behaving, we'll bring you back home immediately." As the echoes of Mrs. Weasley's scolding faded away, Ron slumped in his chair, his forehead flushed with embarrassment. Harry, feeling a heavy weight of guilt, couldn't bring himself to eat. He was partly responsible for the incident, yet Mrs. Weasley hadn't addressed him directly in her tirade, which only intensified his guilt. In a way, he wished she had scolded him as well. Blake watched the spectacle with a mix of amusement and sympathy before turning his attention back to his breakfast. As he was about to finish the last 3 puffs on his plate, he heard Ginny's timid voice from behind him. "Thank you, Blake. Dad wrote to me last night," she said softly. "If you hadn't found someone to vouch for my dad, he might have been dismissed from the ministry to do something as menial as clearing snow." Blake's intervention had clearly made a significant impact, sparing Mr. Weasley from a potentially humiliating fate. The gratitude in Ginny's voice was palpable, highlighting the depth of her family's relief and appreciation. Chapter 241, Why Not Ask About Magical Magic? Hearing Ginny's words of gratitude, Blake wasn't surprised. After all, she had seen him writing a letter for help, and Mr. Weasley was currently under scrutiny rather than being sent directly to Azkaban. This led Ginny to believe that Blake's intervention had made a difference. However, Blake knew his letter was more about securing a future advantage for himself with Grindelwald than about advocating for Mr. Weasley. He wanted to ensure that anything he created wouldn't be deemed contraband in the future. "You don't need to thank me, Ginny," Blake said, dismissing her gratitude. "Even if I hadn't written that letter, Mr. Weasley wouldn't have been sent to Azkaban. His position wouldn't have been demoted. At worst, he might have faced a fine. The modifications he made to the car weren't illegal, as far as I know." Ginny looked at him in surprise. "How do you know this?" "It's simple," Blake explained, taking a bite of his pastry. "I once wanted to do something similar to what your father did, so I researched the legislation thoroughly. What I found was quite interesting. The regulations are full of subtle loopholes, as if those who drafted them left them intentionally. And as far as I know, the person who established these rules is someone you know well, so your dad will be fine. He's probably prepared for this." Blake's reassurance eased Ginny's worries. She had been anxious since her mother informed her of her father's situation, fearing the worst for her family if he were imprisoned. The thought of her father in Azkaban and the impact on her mother was unbearable. She was also frustrated with her brother Ron and Harry Potter for their reckless actions that had endangered her father's position. "Thank you, Blake," Ginny said, her eyes brimming with tears as she considered the potential consequences of her father's actions. "You always know how to put my mind at ease. Don't worry, Ginny, this will all blow over soon. The Ministry of Magic has overlooked far greater mistakes. Your dad's modifications are minor in comparison," Blake reassured her. Ginny nodded, visibly relieved by Blake's words. His confidence and way of speaking had a way of convincing her, as if he was naturally persuasive. "Would you like some puffs?" Blake offered, changing the subject. "A little dessert might lift your spirits. Today is your first day at Hogwarts, after all. You should be in a good mood to welcome this new world." Ginny managed a smile. "No, Blake, I need to write back to my mother and tell her about your analysis. She's really worried. Thank you, Blake." After Ginny left, Cedric, who had been listening, teased Blake about his popularity with the girls. Their banter was light-hearted, with Cedric joking about Blake's charm and Blake playfully boasting about his looks. Their first class of the day was herbology. Thanks to Blake's assistance the night before, Professor Sprout was spared an early morning, setting a positive tone for the day ahead. In the morning, the task was to bandage the humping willow, a task that seemed to invigorate her. However, her mood would have been even more uplifted if not for the presence of Lockhart. He had reverted to his usual, overly polished demeanor, donning a flowing blue robe, complemented by a green top hat, adorned with a gold rim atop his shiny blonde hair. "Oh, hello!" Lockhart greeted the students with a beaming smile. I was just demonstrating to Professor Sprout the proper way to examine the Humping Willow," he added with a flourish. "And I must mention, the Humping Willow's miraculous recovery last night was, partly due to my involvement." Professor Sprout rolled her eyes at Lockhart's boastful claim, but out of professional courtesy, she refrained from calling him out on his lie. Without a word, she turned to open the greenhouse door, leaving Lockhart to revel in his self-praise. However, his boasting was cut short when he caught Blake's half-amused, half-skeptical gaze, prompting him to hastily adjust his narrative. As the greenhouse door swung open, the young wizards entered in an orderly line. Lockhart, seizing the opportunity, whisked Harry away, bombarding the young savior with his endless chatter. This was the first herbology class of the year, a joint session for Gryffindor and Hufflepuff students. Hermione, ever the eager student, positioned herself next to Blake. Blake, meanwhile, surveyed the room's potted plants with a knowing smile. The mention of mandrakes sparked a memory, and he was momentarily lost in thought. Harry slipped in, his expression one of resigned tolerance following his encounter with Lockhart, who had also claimed a role in the Humping Willow's recovery, a notion Blake found amusing. The connection between the cure and mandrakes lingered in his mind, prompting a deep contemplation. Professor Sprout, standing behind a table laden with colorful earmuffs, announced, "Today, we're repotting mandrakes." She then posed a question to the class. "Can anyone tell me about the properties of mandrakes?" Hermione's hand shot up instantly. She glanced at Blake, who, unlike last year, showed no interest in competing for points and seemed preoccupied. "Mandrakes, or mandrake roots, are powerful restoratives," Hermione recited, explaining their use in returning those deformed or under spells to their original state. "Excellent. 10 points for Gryffindor," Professor Sprout praised, before asking another question about the plant's dangers, her eyes briefly settling on Blake, with a hint of disappointment at his unusual disengagement. Hermione, undeterred, raised her hand again to answer. "Hearing a mandrake cry can be fatal." Her correct response earned Gryffindor additional points. Professor Sprout's gaze lingered on Blake, a mix of regret and concern in her eyes. It was unlike him to be so distracted, especially on the first day of school when points were at stake. "Look, these pots are filled with mandrakes, but they are still young," she explained, directing the students' attention to a row of pots housing green and purple seedlings. As the class crowded around for a closer look, Blake remained lost in thought until Hermione nudged him, bringing him back to reality. Realizing he had become the center of attention, he apologized. Sorry, I was a little distracted." Blake stepped forward, his gaze landing on the last pair of pink fluffy earmuffs. The color didn't bother him. After all, he mused, pink was the color of romance for the truly confident. "Blake, are you feeling all right? If not, perhaps you should visit the school infirmary," Professor Sprout suggested with a tone of concern. No, thank you, Professor. Actually, I have a question," Blake replied, hesitating slightly before continuing. "It's about mandrakes. I remember they have a strong restorative effect, particularly for those who have been transformed or cursed, correct?" Professor Sprout nodded. "Indeed, we often use mandrake in brewing a potent recovery potion to counteract some of the more stubborn curses. But Professor, I've been reviewing the recipes for various healing potions, and aside from the recovery potion you mentioned, none seem to include mandrake as an ingredient," Blake pointed out. "That's correct," Professor Sprout confirmed. "Mandrake doesn't aid in healing physical injuries. Its primary use is to revert individuals to their original state, which isn't necessary for most healing potions. To avoid compromising the potion's intended effects, we seldom incorporate mandrake." Blake stroked his chin thoughtfully. "So, Professor, if a healing potion could be formulated with just the right amount of mandrake, without affecting its primary efficacy, could it potentially restore limbs lost to dark magic or other calamities?" The wizarding world was no stranger to miraculous recoveries. Harry Potter's own experience with regrowing bones, which would have been a permanent disability in the non-magical world, was a testament to their advanced healing capabilities. Yet, despite such magic, there remained many within the wizarding community who suffered from irreversible injuries. Notable examples included Professor Sylvanus Kettleburn of the Care of Magical Creatures class, and the legendary Auror, Alastair Moody. The common denominator in these cases was the presence of curses that not only caused the initial injury but also prevented magical regeneration. What if, Blake pondered, the curative properties of Mandrake could be harnessed to counteract those curses? Could we then see the regeneration of lost limbs? Professor Sprout paused, considering the implications. "There's a possibility," she finally said, "but developing a new potion formula is a monumental task. It requires extensive experimentation and data collection, a challenge that might be beyond my expertise. Perhaps Professor Snape could offer more insight." Blake's expression soured at the mention of Snape, but he continued to absent-mindedly fiddle with the pink earmuffs in his hands. Professor Sprout, recognizing Blake's talent and dedication to healing magic, felt a spark of hope. "If you manage to develop such a potion, I'm confident you could earn the highest accolades, even the Merlin First Class badge," she encouraged, her eyes shining with optimism. Blake's inquiry was a mere detour in the day's lesson. The class resumed its focus on the mandrakes, each group of students responsible for one. The plant's root, resembling a grotesque little human, was unsettling to behold, yet it held the potential for groundbreaking advancements in magical healing. At first glance, everyone thought Professor Sprout's demonstration of repotting a mandrake was straightforward. However, when it came time for the students to try, they quickly realized the task was far from easy. The mandrakes seemed to resist being removed from their soil homes, and even more so, they appeared reluctant to settle into new pots. Hermione managed to extract a mandrake, but it was far from cooperative. The plant writhed in her grasp, kicking and waving its limbs while emitting angry cries. When Hermione attempted to place it into a new pot, the mandrake stubbornly clung to the edges, refusing entry. Drenched in sweat and struggling with the obstinate plant, Hermione was at her wits' end. Observing her struggle, Blake stepped in and gently took the mandrake from Hermione. With one hand, he held the plant's branches above its head, and with the other, he soothingly patted its back. Miraculously, the mandrake ceased its thrashing. Seizing the moment, Blake quickly nestled it into the pot. Hermione, astonished, asked, "How did you manage that?" Blake offered a mysterious smile, choosing not to reveal his secret. "Some things are better left unexplained," he implied, hinting at his druidic knowledge without saying it outright. Thanks to his swift and efficient handling of the mandrake, Professor Sprout awarded a generous 20 points to Hufflepuff, seizing the opportunity to reward Blake's skill. As the class neared its end, everyone was exhausted, their backs aching from the effort. Mud covered their bodies, and Hermione, feeling the discomfort of her sweat-soaked clothes, glanced at her watch. She longed for a refreshing shower before heading to Transfiguration class, but was concerned about the time. Suddenly, she felt a light tap on her shoulder. In an instant, her discomfort vanished, replaced by a sensation of being completely refreshed and dry. Turning, she saw Blake, looking impeccably clean, wand in hand. He offered her a knowing look and said, "Why spend time thinking about rushing back for a shower when you could simply think of the right spell?" Blake's intervention not only demonstrated his practical magic skills, but also reminded Hermione of the resourcefulness and efficiency magic could offer in everyday situations. Chapter 242, Coach, I also want to learn a disarming spell that can shoot. I didn't expect it at first, Hermione admitted, a hint of embarrassment in her voice. Indeed, a simple cleansing spell would have sufficed, yet she had contemplated taking a shower instead. This inclination could be attributed to her Muggle upbringing, as she wasn't accustomed to relying on magic for everyday tasks. It was a reminder that proficiency in magic required frequent use. If you don't use it regularly, you'll lose familiarity with it, Blake mused, his thoughts drifting to Lockhart, a prime example of this principle. In his school days, Lockhart had been an exemplary student, particularly excelling in Ravenclaw. Blake found it hard to believe that Lockhart's magical abilities were inherently poor. The only plausible explanation was that after graduation, Lockhart had neglected most of his magical skills, leading to a decline in proficiency. However, his frequent use of the memory charm had honed that specific spell to perfection. Transfiguration class with Professor McGonagall proved challenging for most, including Hermione, despite her being a top student. Blake, however, was an exception. He effortlessly transformed a small beetle into a beautiful button, earning a delighted Professor McGonagall's praise and 20 points for his house. She had never witnessed such immediate success from any student other than Blake. After a brief lunch break, everyone hurried to their next class, Defense Against the Dark Arts, taught by Lockhart. Blake had hoped to avoid Lockhart's class by being scheduled with the Slytherins, but to his surprise, Gryffindors and Hufflepuffs were grouped together. Hermione, sitting next to him, had not marked her schedule with hearts over Lockhart's classes, much to Blake's relief. She was busy arranging Lockhart's voluminous textbooks on the table. Catching Blake's gaze, Hermione inquired, "What are you looking at me for?" "How do you know I'm looking at you if you're not looking at me?" Blake retorted playfully. "You're insufferable." Hermione blushed, raising her copy of Walking with Trolls to swat at Blake. "What are you talking about?" she exclaimed. "Isn't it obvious? Or do you think you're not attractive?" Blake teased, dodging another playful hit. Ignoring Hermione's flustered reaction, Blake provocatively asked, "So, who do you think is more handsome, me or Lockhart?" "You're delusional," Hermione scoffed, though a hint of jealousy betrayed her feelings. Lockhart made his entrance, gripping Harry as if he were a misbehaving child. Harry's dejected expression suggested their interaction had been anything but pleasant. Once inside, Lockhart released Harry, who quickly joined Ron. Lockhart, with a smile, waited for the class to settle before picking up Walking with Trolls from Neville's desk. He gestured to his picture on the cover, launching into his usual self-aggrandizing introduction, boasting of his accolades, but humorously noting that his charming smile wouldn't fend off banshees. His introduction, intended to impress, only elicited a few polite smiles, leaving Lockhart slightly embarrassed by the lukewarm reception. Unperturbed, he announced a quiz to gauge the students' familiarity with his published works, promising it was merely a test of their reading comprehension and understanding. Lockhart distributed the papers he had meticulously prepared, while Blake had already constructed a fortress of thick books on the table, behind which he lay back and began to doze off. "Get up, Blake! It's time for a quiz!" Hermione exclaimed, her voice tinged with excitement. She was the type of person who found joy in the prospect of exams. Blake, however, who had a sneak peek at the questions beforehand, found little interest in them. After all, any question posed by Lockhart was bound to be related to Defense Against the Dark Arts, a subject Blake found less than stimulating. Blake stared at the paper before him, dumbfounded. The first question asked for Lockhart's favorite color. Why not? Ask about the practical ways to fend off werewolves as detailed in the books, he thought. Glancing at Hermione, who was fervently scribbling away with her quill, Blake couldn't help but feel amused. "Hey, can you share the answer with me?" he whispered. Hermione rolled her eyes and protectively covered her paper. Blake pouted, knowing full well that he could easily employ legilimency to obtain the correct answers at any moment. Yet for such a trivial quiz, he felt that even guessing incorrectly would be preferable to using his abilities. Resigned, Blake picked up his pen and began to answer the questions with a touch of sarcasm. "What color do you like?" he wrote. "I'm guessing it's the same as your hat, green." For the question about Lockhart's secret ambition, Blake guessed, to bask in the limelight every day without a single hair out of place, even if you crack your head open and bleed. And when asked about Lockhart's greatest achievement, Blake couldn't resist quipping, "What, are you endorsing a shampoo brand?" As for Lockhart's birthday, Blake cheekily answered, "February 31st. His whispered comments didn't escape Hermione, who grew increasingly exasperated with each ridiculous answer. Despite the absurdity of Lockhart's quiz, Blake's flippant responses were equally outrageous. "Blake, when is the 31st day in February?" Hermione asked, trying to contain her frustration. "Exactly," Blake replied nonchalantly, tossing his paper aside and lying back down in boredom. He began to reminisce about the past, expressing a strange nostalgia for the days when Voldemort, disguised as Professor Quirrell, taught them. Say what you will about Voldemort, but you can't deny he was a competent teacher, Blake mused. Hermione, unable to resist helping her friend, eventually offered her completed paper to Blake. However, he declined, insisting he wouldn't copy her answers. Curious, he turned to Hannah and asked how she had answered, only to find comfort in their shared ignorance. As Lockhart collected the papers and reviewed them, he awarded Hermione a perfect score, praising her with additional points for Gryffindor. Blake, lying silently beside her, couldn't help but let out a snort, prompting Hermione to scold him softly for his pettiness. The class's attention then shifted back to Lockhart, who unveiled a cage covered with cloth, promising to expose them to the most terrifying creatures known to the wizarding world. The room fell silent in anticipation, only for Lockhart to reveal a Cornish elf, causing an uproar of laughter among the students. Even Hermione, who usually held her composure, couldn't help but join in. The supposed most evil and terrifying thing was nothing more than a harmless elf, highlighting the absurdity of Lockhart's lesson and leaving the students both amused and bewildered. Blake looked on, his expression a mix of amusement and disappointment, particularly when he observed the chaos unfolding in front of his classmates, courtesy of Lockhart's latest teaching disaster. The creatures causing the mayhem were little elves, barely 8 inches tall, with sharply pointed cheeks and even sharper voices. As soon as Lockhart had recklessly opened the cage, the classroom descended into chaos, the elves buzzing around like unleashed rockets, their shrill chirping filling the air. Blake, peeking over the top of his book, couldn't help but think Lockhart had lost his mind. It was one thing to capture a single elf for educational purposes, but to unleash an entire swarm upon an unprepared class was madness. The moment the cage door swung open, the elves darted out, causing havoc. Poor Neville Longbottom found himself the target of 2 elves, who hoisted him by the ears and dangled him from the chandelier. Hermione Granger, ever resourceful, initially tried to swat an approaching elf with her book before Blake suggested using magic. She quickly switched to her wand, casting spells in an attempt to subdue the creatures. Lockhart, in a futile attempt to regain control, waved his wand with a ridiculous incantation, only to have his efforts embarrassingly thwarted as his wand was tossed out the window. As the chaos showed no signs of abating, Blake took matters into his own hands. With a flick of his wand, he conjured a powerful whirlwind that swept the elves towards the blackboard. Yet remarkably, the students below remained unaffected by the gust. Then, with a burst of red light from his wand, Blake successfully stunned the gathered elves, causing them to fall like raindrops to the floor. Lockhart, emerging from his hiding spot beneath the podium, was greeted by the sight of a stunned elf landing on his forehead. The students, now looking at Blake with newfound respect, began to question the effectiveness of the stunning spell and expressed a desire to learn more practical spells. As the class ended, Blake effortlessly packed his belongings with a wave of his wand, suggesting to Lockhart that it was perhaps time to conclude the lesson. In the days that followed, Lockhart gave Blake a wide berth, intimidated by his display of magical prowess. Blake's interactions with Ginny Weasley during this time suggested that she had not yet been ensnared by Tom Riddle's diary, giving him hope that he could intervene before any harm came to her. His primary concern remained preventing the diary from leading Ginny into danger. The arrival of the first Sunday of the school year at Hogwarts found Blake planning a secret trip to Hogsmeade. However, his plans were thwarted by Cedric Diggory, who reminded him of his responsibilities as the captain of the Hufflepuff Quidditch team. Despite his lack of sleep and his half-hearted offer to relinquish his captaincy, Cedric firmly reminded Blake of his duties, leaving him no choice but to lead the team's training, much to his chagrin. Blake stood with an air of authority, his voice booming across the Quidditch pitch. "As the captain, I've decided it's time for some serious training. No more excuses. We're starting right now." Cedric, taken aback by the sudden intensity, hesitated. "Are you sure about this? I thought we were going to have a relaxing weekend." Blake's eyes sparkled with a mischievous light. "You asked for it, Cedric. Prepare yourself for the Devil's special training. It begins immediately." Cedric felt a shiver run down his spine. "Is it too late to take that back?" "Far too late," Blake replied, tossing an empty potion bottle to the side. This was an energy-boosting potion. Once you drink it, forget about sleeping today. Now, gather the team. It's time for our first training exercise. 30 minutes later, the entire Hufflepuff Quidditch team stood assembled on the pitch, a mix of anticipation and dread on their faces. Blake surveyed them critically. As wizards, your physical strength is lacking. That's why you're easily knocked off your brooms and struggle to catch the ball. We're going to work on that, and your willpower is even worse. Taking breaks during halftime as if the match is already won? Unacceptable. We start with endurance. Drop your brooms. We're running 3 laps around the pitch to warm up. The team exchanged bewildered looks. The Quidditch pitch was enormous, and 3 laps seemed like a marathon. Cedric approached Blake, trying to reason with him. Blake, this might be a bit much. No excuses. Run, Blake commanded. The team members began their laps, their pace more a leisurely stroll than a run. Blake clicked his tongue in disapproval. This laziness is exactly why we're doing this. You need to build your willpower. He then tossed a ball onto the ground, and from it, a large, seemingly intelligent dog appeared. See that group? If anyone isn't running, give them a little motivation. The dog, Era, barked excitedly and dashed towards the team. When the players glanced back and saw the dog charging, panic set in. Since when do we have a dog on the training regimen? One player yelled, before they all picked up their pace, running as if their lives depended on it. An hour later, the team was sprawled across the pitch, utterly exhausted. Cedric lay on the ground, too tired to move, as Era playfully nipped at his heels. Just let it end, Cedric gasped, half joking, half desperate. Even if Era bites me, I couldn't run another step. Blake looked over his team, a sense of satisfaction mixed with concern. They were exhausted, but he could see the spark of determination in their eyes. This training might have been unconventional, but it was a start. A start to building a team that could stand up to any challenge, both on the ground and in the air. Chapter 243. Ginny, I seem to be violent and hallucinating. The members of Hufflepuff collapsed onto the ground in disarray, each emitting sounds of contentment akin to the satisfaction of drinking a cold bottle of Coke after an intense workout. Despite its unhealthiness, the feeling was undeniably refreshing. Blake, sitting casually on the ground, held a cup of milk tea in his left hand while playfully pinching Era's cheek with his right. Your physical fitness is seriously lacking, he commented nonchalantly. We'll need to make this kind of physical training a regular thing. His carefree demeanor irked the team members. Cedric, dropping his Coke bottle and rubbing his sore spot from where Era had bitten him, voiced his frustration. You're the captain, which makes you part of the team too. Why aren't you running with us? The previous captain joined in on the training he planned. As Cedric's words resonated, a wave of agreement swept through the other team members. Blake, unfazed, simply raised his hand to his ear. That's because he needed the practice, but I don't. As for physical fitness, he trailed off, sensing the growing discontent. All right, I understand your grievances, so let's settle this. With a flick of his wand, Blake transformed an empty bottle on the ground into a thick rope. You're all familiar with tug of war, right? It'll be me against all of you. If I lose, I'll start running now, and I'll even run 3 to 6 more laps than you. But if I win, he flashed a mischievous grin, then you'll have to endure even more rigorous training. Cedric shivered at Blake's unsettling enthusiasm, but rallied the team. Okay, but no magic allowed. This is a test of strength. Of course, no magic, Blake agreed, his tone serious. This isn't about showing off. I want to prove that you truly need to improve your physical fitness. And it's about establishing my authority as your captain. Otherwise, you'll keep resisting every training plan I propose. Let's stop the chatter and get on with it. With no further objections, an unprecedented tug-of-war commenced. One side featured Blake alone, and the other, the entire Quidditch team. Ready, go. Blake immediately felt the strain as the team pulled with all their might. Despite his exceptional strength, comparable even to that of giants, his average teenage weight was a disadvantage against the collective force of the team. Anticipating this, Blake anchored himself by driving his right foot into the ground, burying it up to his calf. The sight stunned his teammates. The soft grass of the stadium offered little resistance, yet Blake's foot had penetrated the earth as if it were nothing. The team's initial concern for Blake's well-being vanished, replaced by a determination not to hold back. After all, The strength Blake was displaying made it clear that he was no ordinary opponent. "Pull harder," they encouraged one another, uniting their efforts. Blake, now as immovable as a mighty oak, smirked. The idea that these little saplings could uproot him was laughable. With his body firmly anchored, he braced for their collective pull, ready to prove his point beyond any doubt. "Do you have enough to eat?" Blake taunted with a smirk, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "At such a young age, you're this weak? That won't do. Perhaps you need some assistance? Maybe some little blue pills?" His mockery didn't stop there. "Tsk, with such a frail physique, you aspire to be an athlete? I've seen old ladies in the supermarket with more vigor than you." Blake's words were venomous, yet Snape remained unaffected. However, the players on the opposing team were another story. Initially filled with indignation, their resolve crumbled in less than half a minute under Blake's relentless taunts. Feeling the tension on the rope lessen, Blake realized his opponents were losing their will to compete. "A group of you can't defeat me alone because you lack strength," he observed, his tone laced with disappointment. "And giving up after less than 30 seconds, I was a lack of willpower. My special training is designed to target both your physical and mental weaknesses. So what do you say? Ready to continue?" Standing alone against a team, Blake's ease and confidence were palpable. The opposing team members, on the other hand, were so demoralized they found themselves speechless, whether from shame or exhaustion. "Come on, you guys," Blake encouraged, a sudden surge of strength coursing through him as he yanked the rope towards himself. "Hey! Oh!" The exclamations filled the air as the entire team was pulled over, landing in a heap, faces first into the mud. Thus, the day's training concluded not with a victory for the Hufflepuff team, but with a humbling defeat. "Are you convinced?" Blake asked, clapping his hands, neither blushing nor out of breath from the exertion. Cedric, maintaining his composure, slowly raised his hand and gave a thumbs up, his voice trembling as he admitted, "You are so powerful." In the world of boys, such an acknowledgement was the highest form of praise. Blake nodded, satisfied with the response. "All right, drink these magic potions to restore your strength. Next, we'll move on to tactical training." "Yes, Captain," came the subdued reply. "Louder! I didn't hear you. Is that how you intend to play Quidditch?" Blake challenged. "Yes, Captain." The response was now unanimous and spirited. In the stands, Ginny, who had come to watch the training out of curiosity, tugged at Hermione's sleeve. I must be seeing things. Did Blake just win a tug-of-war against 7 or 8 people by himself?" Hermione, still in shock, managed to reply. "You're not imagining things. Blake once mentioned he was born with supernatural strength." A week into the school term, Blake received news from Ginny that Mr. Weasley had concluded his review at the Ministry of Magic. Surprisingly, he faced no suspension or fine, receiving only a warning letter. This outcome was beyond anyone's expectations, especially considering Mr. Weasley had braced himself for a hefty fine and salary deduction. Instead, Mr. Weasley's review period involved nothing more strenuous than daily visits to the ministry's censorship office, where he spent his time leisurely reading the newspaper and drinking tea, a routine more relaxed than his usual departmental work. The review concluded with the head of the department sending Mr. Weasley home with a broad smile, a warning letter, and a few words of advice. This turn of events was no coincidence. Upon receiving her father's letter, Ginny immediately connected the dots to Blake's earlier correspondence. She knew Blake must have played a pivotal role in ensuring her father's light reprimand. Without someone influential intervening on Mr. Weasley's behalf, such a favorable outcome would have been impossible. Indeed, Blake had used his connections to mitigate the consequences of Mr. Weasley's mistake, showcasing his ability to influence outcomes behind the scenes. Blake, under the guise of seeking a favor, approached Grindelwald with a request for a few kind words on his behalf. The outcome was as expected. Significant issues were minimized, and minor ones were dismissed entirely. Blake's intention behind this maneuver was to earn Ginny's trust, a goal he achieved by integrating her into his circle of friends. This was part of Blake's broader strategy of building alliances, but it also served a more immediate purpose. On the night he learned of Mr. Weasley's miraculous recovery, Blake ventured into the Forbidden Forest, intent on claiming his reward for aiding Mr. Weasley, a Ford car that had seemingly developed its own consciousness. This peculiar development held great interest for Blake, especially in light of his research on alchemical golems. Months had passed since Blake last set foot in the Forbidden Forest. Its nocturnal ambiance remained as unsettling as ever, yet the darkness held no fear for him. As a druid, Blake was attuned to the secrets of the forest, navigating its depths with ease thanks to the guidance of the plant life that whispered paths to him. It wasn't long before he discovered tire tracks leading deeper into the woods, eventually bringing him to a thicket where the car was concealed. The fact that the car had hidden itself suggested a level of intelligence that intrigued Blake. As he pondered this, the silence was shattered by the roar of an engine, followed by the sudden glare of headlights piercing the darkness. Blake stood his ground, sensing the car's gaze upon him. "That's interesting. A self-aware car," he mused, now convinced of its consciousness. This car represented the second instance of non-biological self-awareness he had encountered, the first being the levitation cloak. The engine roared to life once more as the car burst from its hiding place, charging directly at Blake. With a calm, "Oh, I'm angry," Blake effortlessly sidestepped the attack, employing a dimension gate to teleport a short distance away. The car sped past, missing him entirely, and continued its headlong rush into the shadowy depths of the Forbidden Forest without a moment's hesitation. Blake's encounter with the car not only confirmed its unique intelligence, but also added a layer of intrigue to his research. The forest, with all its mysteries, had once again proven to be a place of unexpected discoveries. Chapter 244, Blake, a reunion with Lily. "GGG, think you can escape? Not a chance." With a step and a spark, Blake vanished from sight, only to reappear in the driver's seat of the car in an instant. "Jab Lala." The car screeched to a halt, attempting to use its momentum to eject Blake. However, Blake transformed into a column of black smoke and exited the vehicle, reappearing in front of it. This flying magic, a gift from Voldemort, proved quite handy. Seeing Blake unharmed, the driver attempted to reverse the car, hoping to make another escape, but Blake was not about to let that happen. Raising his wand, he cast Wingardium Leviosa. The car's engine roared once more, but movement was futile. Blake's powerful levitation spell had lifted the entire vehicle off the ground. Like a turtle flipped onto its back, the car's wheels spun helplessly in the air, unable to find purchase. Blake sensed a whirlwind of emotions emanating from the car. Fear, anger, grievance. "Don't be afraid, I'm not here to hurt you," he reassured. Despite his words, the car's wheels continued to spin in desperation. "Revert to your original state," Blake commanded, casting a repair spell on the car. A peculiar noise emerged from the vehicle as it began to mend itself, the windshield previously shattered by the humping willow swiftly repairing. The car's mood seemed to stabilize as it sensed the improvements within. "See, I told you I'm not here to harm you," Blake said, noting the cessation of the frantic wheel spinning. The headlights switched to a low beam, shining on Blake, a sign of its calming emotions. Blake, intrigued by a soul-like energy within the car, pressed his hand against its engine. His necromancer sensitivity allowed him to detect this unusual presence. With his wand, he cast a soul-soothing spell, marveling as the car's mood settled further, even expressing gratitude for the repairs. "Mr. Weasley, what kind of miracle have you unintentionally created?" Blake mused, setting the car back on the ground. It no longer sought to flee, allowing Blake to inspect it more closely. Just as he was about to investigate the source of the car's faint soul, the engine roared a warning, not out of anger, but concern for nearby danger. Blake smiled, patting the car's hood. "Don't worry, I'm already aware." His druidic connection to the forest and commanding presence had alerted him to the presence of acromantulas. "Now, let's address this situation together," Blake said, releasing a Pokeball. A massive, colorful acromantula appeared. "Shao Kai, you know what to do." "Sha-sha-sha," Shao Kai responded, ready for action. "Excellent, off you go." With that, Shao Kai dashed into the depths of the Forbidden Forest. Blake turned back to the car, which unlocked itself automatically, ready to assist in whatever came next. Blake opened the cab door with a hint of curiosity. "Oh, inviting me into the car? Okay then." After he got in, the car immediately rushed forward and, to his surprise, soared into the sky. It was clear that its flight function had been expertly repaired by Blake. Unbeknownst to the car, the risks it took did not pose any threat to Blake at all. He simply wanted to escape with Blake. The following morning, Blake walked into the auditorium for breakfast, his appearance marked by dark circles under his eyes, a clear sign of another sleepless night. Despite his listlessness, there was a spark of joy in his eyes. "I really learned a lot last night," he thought to himself. However, his moment of reflection was interrupted by a disapproving voice from behind. "Did you forget something?" Without needing to look, Blake knew who had approached. "What did I forget?" he asked. "I believe someone forgot about a long-standing agreement amidst their shameful activities," Snape replied, his cold gaze meeting Blake's as he turned around. Snape, aware of the curious glances from the surrounding students, quickly added, "After breakfast, come to my office," before swiftly exiting the auditorium. Blake sighed, touching his nose. "Didn't I just forget to give you your potion?" he muttered to himself. With no classes that morning, he had hoped to catch up on some sleep, but it seemed that was no longer an option. Snape's insistence on receiving his potion was becoming a nuisance, but Blake had a plan that could solve everything. Why not summon Lily's ghost? Blake thought. As a master of necromancy, he knew it was within his power to do so, and it could potentially free Snape from his obsession while also rewarding Blake handsomely. Feeling suddenly energized, Blake quickly finished his breakfast and headed out, not to Snape's office, but to the kitchen, where he gathered freshly slaughtered chickens with the help of the enthusiastic house elves. With everything he needed, Blake made his way to Snape's office, eager to see the reaction when Snape was reunited with Lily. On his way, Blake encountered Cassandra and several other Slytherin girls being harassed by Peeves, the mischievous ghost. Peeves was about to throw something disgusting at them when Blake intervened, using his magic to create a mirror space that swallowed Peeves' attack, leaving Cassandra and the others unharmed. "Peeves, how dare you bully my, good friend," Blake exclaimed, his anger evident. He had managed to turn the situation around, saving his friends from Peeves's prank and continuing on his mission to Snape's office with a renewed sense of purpose. Despite Peeves' reputation for being a nuisance, Blake was one of the rare students who wasn't intimidated by him. After all, Peeves was merely a ghost, and what reason would a necromancer have to fear a ghost? "Eat my dung eggs!" Peeves wasted no time, hurling several large eggs at Blake. Unable to dodge, Blake resorted to using a mirror space, which absorbed the eggs before they could explode. A slight smirk appeared on Blake's face. "Is that all you've got? Ah, curse you, you little devil!" Peeves, visibly frustrated, hovered in midair. He had no intention of retreating, confident in his immunity to harm from students. In his view, only a few figures at Hogwarts, such as the Bloody Baron, the headmaster, and the professors, deserved his respect. The students, on the other hand, were of no concern to him. Blake, however, simply smiled in response. He retrieved a piece of parchment from his system warehouse and began inscribing several arcane symbols upon it. With a flourish, he waved the parchment in the air and exclaimed, "Tai Shang Lao Jun, heed my call as if bound by law. Sign for it." He then tossed the parchment towards Peeves, but it merely fluttered to the ground, seemingly ineffective. Peeves was momentarily taken aback, then burst into laughter. "What is this kid trying to do? He's hilarious." However, his laughter was cut short as the parchment suddenly emitted a purple glow, and the symbols on it came to life. Realizing too late that something was amiss, Peeves attempted to flee through the wall, but an unseen force from the parchment began to pull at him relentlessly. "No! Let Peeves go!" he cried, but his plea was in vain as his form was absorbed into the parchment. Blake approached calmly and picked up the parchment, now bearing a vivid, lifelike portrait of Peeves, its colors unnaturally bright. Blake nodded in satisfaction. The invocation of Tai Shang Laojun was merely a ruse. The true power lay in the necromantic symbols inscribed on the parchment, designed to capture ghosts. "Peeves, you'll stay in here and reflect on your actions," Blake declared, folding the parchment and pocketing it. It seemed that necromancy could prove quite useful in dealing with troublesome spirits. Blake turned to see Cassandra, her face flushed with emotion. You just said that I was yours. Before she could finish, Blake interjected, "Ah, I just remembered. Professor Snape needed me for something." With that, he vanished down the corridor, leaving Cassandra fuming and stamping her foot in frustration. "If you don't show up again, I'll have to summon you," Snape warned as he opened his office door, glaring at Blake. "I was delayed by a minor incident," Blake explained, shrugging. "Where's the potion?" Snape asked, anticipation in his eyes. "Forgot it," Blake admitted unabashedly. Snape's expression darkened, and he moved to close the door, but Blake's strength prevented it from shutting. "Do you intend to brew the potion here?" Blake offered with a smile. "Unless you're worried I'll steal the recipe." Snape's demeanor shifted. "Are you reneging on our agreement?" "Not at all. I've discovered a permanent solution," Blake assured him. "And what might that be?" Snape inquired, unable to hide his curiosity. "It's simple. I'll allow you to meet Lily Potter, and you can tell her everything you've wanted to say," Blake proposed, meeting Snape's skeptical gaze. "Goodbye," Snape said dismissively, attempting to close the door once more. Blake persisted. "I'm serious. I can summon her soul. Why won't you believe me?" "If you don't leave now, I'll deduct points from Hufflepuff," Snape threatened, his patience wearing thin. "Well," Blake began, undeterred, his proposal hanging in the air, a testament to the unconventional paths his necromantic abilities could lead him down. "Forget it. If you don't believe me, that's your choice. However, I must say, the talent I discovered over the vacation is quite useful," Blake said, turning to leave. "Wait," Snape's voice halted him. A smile crept across Blake's face as he turned back. "Oh, have you decided to believe me now?" Snape's lips twitched slightly, a sign of his internal struggle. He couldn't fathom believing that this young, seemingly lunatic student could actually summon souls. Yet Dumbledore had shared tales of the boy's peculiarities, including his knack for acquiring odd abilities that ranged from powerful spells to unique magical talents. Given this, Snape couldn't dismiss the possibility outright, especially when it concerned Lily. The mere thought that there might be a sliver of hope in Blake's claim meant Snape couldn't just walk away. "If you're lying to me," Snape began, his voice heavy with a mix of hope and caution. He was all too aware that the higher one's hopes, the greater the potential for disappointment. The thought of being played a fool by this student was unbearable. "Don't worry, I wouldn't lie about something like this," Blake assured him. Snape, albeit reluctantly, opened the door wider to let Blake in. Blake couldn't help but be slightly amused by Snape's composure. Despite the shocking nature of his claim, Snape seemed to be holding back his emotions, perhaps still skeptical at heart. "What do you plan to do?" Snape inquired, his curiosity getting the better of him. Blake responded with a light-hearted suggestion. "Relax. Shouldn't you offer me a cup of tea first?" This elicited a barely perceptible twitch from Snape's mouth, a clear sign of his irritation. Ding! Irritated and angry emotions detected. Blake thought to himself, amused by Snape's reaction. Ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving a golden treasure chest. Seeing Snape's patience wearing thin, Blake decided to drop the teasing. "All right, I won't tease you any longer," he said, then proceeded to take out a large white cloth and spread it on the ground, preparing for what was to come next. Chapter 245. Snape, please convey to your wife the words I just spoke. In the depths of Snape's underground classroom, a perpetual gloom and chill pervaded, an ambience that seemed almost tailor-made for the summoning of the undead. This setting, combined with Blake's formidable necromancy, ensured that despite the daylight filtering weakly through the high windows, the conditions were perfect for reaching out to the spirit of Lily. Blake methodically arranged the necessary items for the ritual, a red candle, a thin line, and various other arcane components. Snape, initially bewildered by the preparations, watched with a growing mix of skepticism and intrigue. Could it be that Blake wasn't merely fabricating tales? The thought crossed his mind that no one would go to such lengths for a mere deception. Yet, Snape couldn't shake off his doubts about Blake's character. As Snape pondered his decision to trust Blake, the latter instructed, "What are you doing standing there? Just close the door." With a frown, Snape pointed his wand at the door, which slammed shut with a definitive sound. Blake then proceeded to pour blood into a chalice, a sight that made Snape increasingly uneasy. The ritual bore an unsettling resemblance to dark magic, raising the question of whether Blake intended to practice forbidden arts within Hogwarts. "Are you certain this will summon Lily?" Snape couldn't help but ask, his voice laced with skepticism. Blake, while painting runes on the ground with dragon's blood, spared Snape a glance. "Instead of doubting, perhaps you should consider what you'll say to Lily if she does appear. It would be a shame if, after all this effort, you found yourself at a loss for words." Snape was momentarily taken aback by the thought. Indeed, what would he say to Lily if the summoning succeeded? He realized he needed to prepare, to find the right words for their potential reunion. Meanwhile, Blake finalized the setup, placing several raw chickens within the magic circle to prolong the summoning's effect. "Ready?" he asked, turning to Snape, who seemed lost in thought. "Could we possibly do this another day?" Snape muttered, his anxiety palpable. Blake looked at him incredulously. "We're at the final step, and you're hesitating now?" Snape's grip on his wand tightened, his nervousness unlike anything he'd felt before, even in the presence of the Dark Lord. "Is your professed love a lie?" Blake taunted, his words cutting deep. "No, it's just, I'm not sure what to say," Snape admitted quietly. Satisfied with Snape's commitment, Blake proceeded with the ritual. Lighting the candle, he began chanting in an eerie tone, essential to the necromancer's craft. A strange gray mist began to swirl around him, the temperature in the room dropping further. Snape, despite his familiarity with the cold, felt a chill. As the mist enveloped Blake, the environment seemed to shift entirely, signaling his entry into the realm of the dead. Blake called out for Lily Potter, his voice echoing in the void, as he sought the familiar presence among the shadows. This time, however, he noticed something different, a barrier surrounding him, isolating him from the spirits beyond. With a sense of determination, Blake continued to call Lily's name, hoping to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Blake stood amidst the ethereal landscape of the world of the dead, his mind focused on finding Lily Potter. He was careful to distinguish her from any other undead sharing her name. As he concentrated, a golden figure emerged from the shadowy crowd, illuminated as if by a sudden shaft of light. This figure, a woman with vibrant red hair and piercing blue eyes, gradually approached Blake, her form becoming clearer with each step. Upon seeing Blake, the woman's eyes widened in surprise. "It's you?" she asked. Blake, puzzled, replied, "You recognize me?" "No, I don't know you. I just remember seeing you here once before. Why have you summoned me again?" she inquired. "Someone wishes to meet you," Blake explained. "Is it somehow me from the living?" she asked, a hint of resignation in her voice. "Yes," Blake confirmed, "but I am already dead. The deceased have passed on." She trailed off, her voice tinged with sadness. "It's important. It's about resolving unresolved issues. Please, come with me," Blake urged. As they conversed, an intrigued figure appeared outside the protective cover, unseen by Snape, who was enveloped in a thickening gray fog within his underground office. Suddenly, a slender figure materialized from the mist, startling Snape. This was not Blake. It was unmistakably a woman, her familiar silhouette causing Snape's heart to tremble. As the woman emerged from the gray mist, her features became distinct. Red hair, a gentle demeanor, Snape's vision blurred with emotion. "Severus?" The soft, familiar voice transported Snape back to a painful memory from over a decade ago, a memory that had turned his world into a living hell. "Severus, is that you?" the voice repeated, pulling Snape back to the present. Choked with emotion, Snape managed to say, "I'm sorry. Lily, it's all my fault. If it weren't for my actions, you wouldn't have died." His confession was interrupted by tears. The weight of his guilt made it difficult for him to even stand. Snape had rehearsed his apology countless times, but in the moment, all he could express was his remorse. His betrayal had led Voldemort to target Lily's son, Harry, believing him to be a future adversary. This ultimately led to the tragic death of Lily and her family. Snape's guilt, fueled by his deep love for Lily, had consumed him for most of his life. Lily's gaze was soft and understanding, yet it only deepened Snape's sorrow. He would have preferred her anger to the calm pity and sadness in her eyes. "The child who summoned me has already told me everything," Lily said gently. "This tragedy was a result of a complex series of events. I can't entirely blame you. I also bear some responsibility." If I hadn't severed ties with you so abruptly, if I had tried harder to pull you away from those dark influences, perhaps things would be different for you now," she continued, her voice filled with a mixture of pity and sadness. Snape was visibly struggling, not with his external circumstances, but with the internal torment that had plagued him for years. Lily's understanding and her words of shared responsibility offered a glimmer of solace, but the depth of Snape's guilt and love for her remained a powerful force, shaping his life even beyond her death. Severus Snape's demeanor had grown increasingly sinister and withdrawn. No, it's all because of my hopelessness," he lamented, his voice a whisper of despair. "You did your best, but I was too stubborn," he continued, a note of regret threading through his words. "If I could turn back time, I would never dabble in dark magic, nor would I associate with those people again." Snape reached out, attempting to grasp Lily's hand, but his fingers slipped through hers as if she were made of air. It was then he remembered. Lily was no longer of this world. The figure before him was but the ethereal presence of her departed soul. A wave of sorrow crashed over Snape, a poignant reminder of his belated realization. If only he had heeded the warnings, if only someone had enlightened him sooner, perhaps fate might have charted a different course. Lily, observing Snape's melancholy, offered a gentle smile. "I heard you're now the potions professor at Hogwarts?" she said, her voice a balm to his tormented spirit. "Isn't that wonderful? You may think it's too late, but for you, it's not too late at all." "You've finally broken free from those people, haven't you?" she added, her words tinged with hope. Snape nodded, a bitter acknowledgement of his past affiliations. A sense of shame enveloped him, realizing that if not for Lily's tragic fate, he might still have been ensnared in the clutches of the Death Eaters, perhaps even languishing in Azkaban. "Harry must be attending Hogwarts by now, right?" Lily inquired, her voice so teeming at the mention of her son. "So, you're Harry's teacher?" Again, Snape nodded. The mention of Harry evoked a long-forgotten smile from Lily, a smile that had ceased to grace Snape's presence long ago. Their conversation meandered through past events and heartfelt advice. Lily implored Snape to safeguard her children, a request any mother would make. Despite his aversion to the boy who bore James's visage, Snape vowed to protect Harry with his life, honoring Lily's wish. As their time together waned, a voice emerged from the enveloping mist, signaling the moment of departure. Lily bestowed upon Snape one final smile before turning to merge with the mist. Just as her silhouette vanished, Snape's voice pierced the silence. "Lily, there's something I've longed to tell you," he exclaimed. "Lily, I love you." The mist quivered, as if stirred by the intensity of his confession. Snape's eyes widened in anticipation, hoping for a response. Instead, a different figure emerged, causing Snape's expression to freeze, a twitch betraying his initial shock. Yet, understanding Lily's forgiveness, even within the span of mere minutes, had profoundly altered his state of mind. Swiftly regaining his composure, he addressed the figure. "Oh, it's you. Please convey those words to your wife." In an instant, the mist dissipated, leaving only Blake, who had been sitting before the magic circle. Rising to his feet, Blake teased, "Professor Snape, Harry's father was quite ready to confront you upon hearing your words." Snape, puzzled, inquired if Lily had heard his confession. Blake confirmed, adding that James Potter's reaction was tempered by Lily's intervention. Regaining his composure, Snape, with a flicker of amusement, tossed a gold galleon to Blake, a silent acknowledgement of their shared moment. Chapter 246, Tom. Voldemort was killed by a baby. How could I have such a dream? September 25th, cloudy. Ginny held the quill, poised to write in an empty diary she had found among her old textbooks. She had just penned the date and weather when, to her astonishment, the freshly applied ink vanished before her eyes. Ginny blinked, disbelieving. Had she imagined writing those words? Why did they disappear, as if they were never there? Ginny was certain she wasn't losing her memory. There had to be something peculiar about this diary. Why else would a diary that erases its own writing exist? Just as she was about to discard the diary, thinking it defective, words materialized on the blank title page as if penned by an invisible hand. "Hello. Nice to meet you. My name is Tom Riddle." Ginny's eyes widened in surprise. A diary that communicates? Intrigued, she picked up her quill once more and cautiously wrote, "Hello, My name is Ginny Weasley. Despite the oddity of the situation, Ginny, in her innocence, didn't hesitate to reveal her real name. Hello, Ginny. I hope my appearance doesn't frighten you, but I want to assure you there's no need to be afraid. I'm merely a memory, incapable of anything but this form of communication. As the diary responded, Ginny realized that the ink she had just used was being absorbed by the diary, transforming into the words that replied to her. Curious, she poured some ink directly onto the diary's pages. The ink spread, staining the paper, but then it vanished without a trace, as if the diary had absorbed it. Thank you, that's much better, the diary wrote back, its handwriting now crisp and clear. Ginny, now thoroughly fascinated, wrote, You said you are a memory? What does that mean? I'm a fifth-year student at Hogwarts, the diary explained. This diary contains a memory of mine from when I was 16. So, the entity replying to you now is merely the memory of the student named Tom Riddle. You could say I am him, and yet I am not. Ginny, excited by the mystery, replied, Then I will go and look up the name Tom Riddle. Let me see if I can find you now. Then I will come back and tell you. There's no need to trouble yourself, thank you. I might be unknown now, making it difficult for you to find me. Besides, even if I were famous, it wouldn't be under this name. Ginny was puzzled by the diary's response. Don't you like your current name? Yes, this name is too ordinary. I've always wanted to change it. Thus began Ginny's conversations with a diary that could talk back. To a young girl like Ginny, this diary was the perfect confidant. She had inadvertently ignored her father's warning. Never trust something that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain. Ginny, the youngest daughter of the Weasley family, was cherished by her relatives, but often felt misunderstood by her brothers. She longed for a friend with whom she could share her thoughts. Now, as a new student at school with few close friends, this diary filled a void in Ginny's heart. As their conversations continued, the diary, embodying the memory of Tom Riddle at his most cunning and intelligent age, subtly probed Ginny for information on topics that intrigued him. When I was trapped within the diary, I was merely 16 years old. I have no concept of the current time, Tom Riddle mused, his words echoing in the confined space of the diary. However, I suspect it's been quite a while since my era. So, could you inform me of the current year? He inquired with a hint of curiosity. It's 1992, Ginny responded with a sense of matter-of-factness, her quill scratching against the paper. And what year was it when you were 16? She continued, eager to understand the breadth of time that had passed. Realization dawned on Tom Riddle. It appears a significant amount of time has elapsed, he sighed, the weight of the years settling upon him. Then, how many years exactly? Almost 50 years, Ginny wrote back, her handwriting steady. Tom Riddle's attention drifted, not overly concerned that Ginny would decipher the true significance of the name Tom Riddle. After all, only a select few knew that Tom Riddle was, in fact, Voldemort. Yet, 50 years had passed. Surely, he mused, I must have achieved my goal of domination by now. In his spectral form, Tom Riddle keenly sensed the purity of blood in the young girl before him. This was Hogwarts, and this pure-blood girl was a student here. Could it be that the ideologies I championed have come to fruition? Filled with anticipation, Tom Riddle ventured, Being confined to this diary, I've been oblivious to the outside world. I imagine a lot must have happened over these 50 years. There must have been some remarkable individual, right? He prodded gently. Ginny paused to think before excitedly picking up her quill again. Yes, a remarkable person did emerge. His arrival brought an end to the war in the wizarding world. Thanks to him, we now enjoy a peaceful and stable existence. Our generation has grown up on tales of his heroics. Tom Riddle's excitement surged. Though the notion of peace and stability seemed at odds with his own vision, he couldn't help but wonder if perhaps his future self had adopted new philosophies. Regardless, this paragon of virtue had to be him, Voldemort. For who else could surpass his greatness? And the name of this illustrious individual? Tom Riddle inquired, anticipation coloring his words. He was certain Ginny would reveal his own name. You probably haven't heard of him, Ginny wrote, her excitement palpable. He was still an infant when he defeated Voldemort 12 years ago. His name is Harry Potter. She added, I only dare to write Voldemort's name in your diary. Normally, we refer to him as he who must not be named because of the fear his name instills. Tom Riddle's essence quivered. The subsequent words from Ginny lost their significance. It was the revelation that he, the great Voldemort, had been vanquished by an infant that shattered his composure. Defeated by a baby? The thought was inconceivable. Ginny awaited a response, her excitement giving way to concern as the diary remained silent. The immediate replies had ceased. Why the sudden delay? "Tom, are you still there?" she wrote once more, a hint of worry creeping into her words. A sigh of relief escaped her when she noticed the ink being absorbed as usual. After a brief pause, a new sentence materialized. "Apologies for the delay. It's not that I didn't want to respond. I'm simply a bit drained at the moment. As a mere memory, I possess no magical power, and responding to you depletes my limited reserves. But fear not, simply set me aside, and I shall recuperate gradually," Tom Riddle explained, his tone resigned. Choosing to fabricate an excuse, Tom Riddle was no longer inclined to engage with Ginny. The notion that he, at the pinnacle of his power, could be defeated by an infant was a truth too absurd to accept. He desired solitude, a chance to reflect within the confines of the diary. Ginny carefully closed the diary and placed it in her school bag. As she rose from her chair, a wave of dizziness washed over her. She attributed it to staying up late and thought little of it. Turning off her desk lamp, she climbed back into her four-poster bed and quickly succumbed to sleep, unaware of the unusual fatigue that enveloped her that night. Surveying the vast expanse adorned with a myriad of flowers, Blake stepped into the cabin, his heart brimming with contentment. Today had been exceptional, courtesy of Professor Snape's remarkable feat. Snape had unearthed a diamond treasure chest for Blake, a rarity of immense value. Despite reaching his limit after unveiling just 2 treasure chests, the high quality of these chests made it all worthwhile. Thus, both Blake and Snape found satisfaction in their achievements, Blake with his newfound treasure and Snape having untangled a personal dilemma. As night enveloped the surroundings, excitement surged within Blake. It had been ages since he last laid eyes on such a coveted tea, Riajour, stirring a mix of anticipation and nerves within him. "It's been quite some time since I've seen a treasure chest of this caliber. I can't help but feel a bit anxious," Blake mused, his hands rubbing together in anticipation. As per his ritual, Blake retrieved a bottle of lucky potion. Tonight was significant, with the promise of unveiling treasures, including a mythical beast egg from the secret realm yet to hatch. Believing in the necessity of luck, Blake took a hearty swig of the potion, immediately feeling an odd sensation coursing through his body. At that moment, he knew the aura of fortune, often dubbed the European Emperor's energy, was upon him. "System, open the diamond treasure chest," Blake commanded with eager anticipation. "Ding! The diamond treasure chest is being opened for the host," the system responded. "Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Eye of Truth," came the next announcement, filling Blake with a rush of exhilaration. "Ding! Would the host like to install the Eye of Truth?" the system inquired, awaiting his decision. Blake stood in the dim light of his cabin, pondering the newfound power that lay within his grasp. The Eye of Truth, not just any treasure. It was a key to unseen realms and hidden truths, a tool that could potentially alter the course of his adventures. With a heart full of ambition and a mind racing with possibilities, Blake knew that this moment could mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey. Chapter 247, The Eye of Truth. Blake, filled with curiosity, inquired about truth. "System, what exactly is the Eye of Truth? And how can it be used?" The system responded promptly. The Eye of Truth is a unique form of magical ability that allows the user to see through illusions and perceive the true essence of things. It renders all magic from the 10 cut eyes ineffective and enables the user to assess the capabilities and potential of plants and animals at a glance. Blake was thrilled with this explanation. The ability to see through disguises and understand the true nature of things was invaluable. More importantly, the potential to evaluate the abilities and potential of living beings could significantly aid in identifying individuals with high potential beyond those mentioned in the original Harry Potter series. This could be instrumental in forming strategic alliances and identifying promising candidates for future endeavors. Considering the potential benefits, Blake decided to proceed. System, please install the Eye of Truth. As soon as the system confirmed the installation process, Blake experienced an intense itching sensation in his eyes, causing involuntary tears. Despite his attempts to alleviate the discomfort, it persisted until suddenly it vanished, replaced by a refreshing sensation. Upon opening his eyes, if anyone had been present, they would have noticed a remarkable glow emanating from Blake's eyes. Without intending to, Blake released the newfound power, resulting in 2 golden beams shooting out, forcefully removing the roof of the wooden house and causing a disturbance in the Room of Requirement's simulated sky. Realizing the extent of the power at his disposal, Blake quickly reined it in, the golden light vanishing as he did so. He muttered to himself, relieved that he managed to prevent any irreversible damage to the Room of Requirement. As the room repaired itself, Blake couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and pride. Incredible. The Eye of Truth not only grants me the ability to see the truth, but also wields considerable power, he thought. Regaining his composure, Blake examined his reflection in a small mirror. He noticed a subtle golden ring around his pupils, which seemed to blend seamlessly with his natural eye color when the Eye of Truth was not actively being used. Blake realized the potential of his new ability not just for understanding the world around him, but also for defending himself, if necessary. With a newfound sense of confidence, he decided to explore the limits of the Eye of Truth, ready to uncover the secrets hidden from the naked eye, and perhaps use this power to navigate the challenges that lay ahead in this magical world. The circle of golden thread would slowly disappear. After conducting some experiments, Blake discovered that the thickness of the golden wire was directly related to how widely he opened the Eye of Reality. At its fullest extent, the golden thread would expand to cover the entire pupil, emitting golden rays constantly. Satisfied, Blake stored the mirror away. Initially, he had thought the Eye of Truth was merely an auxiliary ability, but now he realized its potential for aggression was immense. Next, Blake decided to explore other capabilities of the Eye of Reality. He opened his mystical eye, intending to observe the plants outside to discern their abilities and potential. However, as soon as he activated the Eye of Truth, he found himself rooted to the spot in astonishment. He didn't need to step outside the cabin at all. His vision effortlessly penetrated the wooden walls, allowing him to clearly see the flora outside. The once solid walls appeared to him as if they were made of translucent glass. See-through abilities too? Blake gasped, wiping away tears of excitement. This reward is far beyond just skimming the surface of the diamond treasure chest. After regaining his composure, Blake picked up the mirror again, only to find it redundant, as his enhanced vision passed straight through it. He had no choice but to maintain his perspective ability active. Then, in a curious experiment, Blake's soul momentarily left his body, allowing him to observe his own physical form through the Eye of Truth. Indeed, this clairvoyant skill is incredibly discreet. Others shouldn't be able to detect it, Blake mused as his soul returned to his body. He then directed his attention to the plants outside once more. An interesting scene caught his eye. The row of humping willows in the distance shimmered under his true sight, emitting various faint lights from their canopies. One, in particular, stood out with a thick, faint golden glow, while the others displayed colors ranging from purple, blue, cyan, to white. System: does the Eye of Truth assess the abilities and potential of animals and plants in the same way as the equipment rating system? Blake inquired. Ding! The light observed by the true eye represents a comprehensive evaluation of the ability and potential value of the animal or plant. The highest level is gold, followed by purple, blue, cyan, and white, the system responded. Ding! Only entities outlined in blue or higher can yield treasure chests above the gold level. Those outlined in cyan or below can only yield silver treasure chests. With this newfound understanding, Blake hurried outside to the humping willows. Upon examining them through the system panel, he confirmed that the tree with the golden glow indeed possessed the strongest attributes among them. Green Girl, Blake called out to his phoenix. Chirp! Green Girl materialized on Blake's arm, tilting her head curiously at him. Through the Eye of Truth, Blake saw a faint golden light emanating from her, indicating that the ice crystal phoenix was of legendary golden status. Chirp, chirp, chirp? Is something the matter? Green Girl chirped, puzzled by Blake's silent contemplation and slightly worried. It's all right. I've got some cod for you. Blake cheerfully presented a bucket of cod, placing it on the ground. Though unsure of Blake's intentions, Green Girl happily descended to enjoy her meal. Tweet, tweet, tweet. Remember, I'm eating because you offered, not because I wanted to. If I gain weight, it's on you, she teased. Blake affectionately stroked her feathers. Of course, I'm the one who offered. Enjoy your meal without worry. I could never think less of you. Blake, intrigued by the potential of magical animals and plants, decided to conduct an experiment. Alone in the room of requirement, he drew a gentle circle in the air, summoning a small dimensional gate. Peering through it with the eye of truth, he observed his own dormitory, where his roommates, Roger Malone and Wayne Hopkins, lay asleep, their bodies emitting a faint blue glow indicative of their potential and talent. Surprisingly, Bob's aura was a distinct shade of purple, a testament to his exceptional ability as an animagus at such a young age. Closing the dimensional gate, Blake reflected on the rewards granted by the Eye of Truth, considering them to be of supreme value, capable of offering support, attack, and control at will. His anticipation grew as he turned his attention to the Supreme Treasure Box, eager to discover what Tiho-level reward it held. Upon opening the Supreme Treasure Box, Blake was greeted with the announcement of obtaining an illustrated system module, a concept foreign to him. Questioning the system about its purpose, he learned that it allowed for the addition of a picture book function. This function would enable Blake to collect information on individuals he had completely conquered, ensuring their absolute loyalty and preventing any second thoughts, provided he accepted them as his younger brothers. Moreover, the illustrated book offered a feedback function, where each character included would randomly enhance one of Blake's attributes, the magnitude of which depended on the character's abilities and potential. The more powerful and promising the younger brothers, the greater the attribute boost Blake would receive, with the added benefit that death of these younger brothers would not diminish the increased attributes. Blake listened in astonishment to the system's explanation. The concept of strengthening oneself by taking in younger brothers, with the extent of enhancement directly correlated to their abilities and potential, was both novel and intriguing. The most compelling aspect was the assurance of unwavering loyalty from these younger brothers, a strategic advantage that could significantly bolster his strength and influence. Blake pondered the implications of his rewards, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. The ability to have loyal followers who would never betray him was indeed a powerful advantage. However, the realization that the effectiveness of this reward hinged on his own ability to persuade and conquer potential followers added a layer of complexity to the situation. It reminded him of how Grindelwald had once enticed people to join his cause, a thought that made Blake uneasy. As he mulled over the rewards, Blake's thoughts drifted to the Eye of Truth he had received earlier. This particular reward allowed him to assess someone's potential and abilities, which seemed to complement his other reward perfectly. The synergy between being able to identify worthy individuals and then convincing them to become his loyal followers struck Blake as more than coincidental. System, are you certain these rewards were randomly assigned? Blake questioned, skepticism lacing his voice. It feels like they're two sides of the same coin. A moment of realization dawned on him, causing a shiver to run down his spine. Wait a second. Does this mean I've inadvertently set myself on a path that could be seen as manipulative or even dark? The thought lingered in his mind, casting a shadow over the initial excitement of his rewards. Blake understood that the power he now wielded came with significant responsibility. The challenge would not only be in acquiring loyal followers, but also in ensuring that his methods and intentions remained just and honorable. The last thing he wanted was to mirror the dark paths trodden by the likes of Grindelwald. Chapter 248, Does living a special life count as a specialty? Blake imagined the scene vividly. He stood on a high platform, igniting a powerful flame as a dramatic special effect. Then he began to deliver a compelling speech, convincing everyone to join his ranks. Hiss! Wait, why does this scenario seem so familiar? After pondering for a moment, Blake realized the similarity. It was essentially about recruiting followers. As long as you gain followers, you become stronger. Why worry about sustenance when you have ambition? Thus, Blake decisively commanded, "System, install the illustration module." Ding! The system is installing this module. Ding! The system is being upgraded. Ding! The system upgrade is complete. The illustration module has been successfully added. The host can now access the illustrated book at any time. Blake nodded in approval and murmured, "Open the illustrated book." As soon as he finished speaking, the system panel opened, revealing a book-like icon that slowly unfolded before him. Initially, the illustrated book was blank, indicating that individuals must explicitly choose to follow him before they appear in the book. Merely having a good relationship with him wasn't enough for automatic inclusion. Blake studied the blank pages, pondering over potential followers. Despite his efforts, he struggled to think of suitable candidates. Sigh. It seems I need to establish a more defined career path, Blake mused. Suddenly, the system chimed in. Ding! A follower who voluntarily chooses to follow the host has been detected. Would you like to include them? Huh? Blake looked at the illustrated book, puzzled. He hadn't taken any steps to recruit followers yet. Where did this follower come from? System, retrieve this person's information for me, Blake requested. Ding! The data retrieval is successful. Please review it. Host. Blake noticed a new selection box on the previously blank page. A blurry photo sticker was inside the frame, hinting at the identity of the new follower. He tapped the frame lightly, and the person's photo along with some information materialized. Ah, I almost forgot about this, Blake said, touching his forehead. The photo revealed a young girl with a charming smile. Gabrielle Delacour, 1/4 Villa blood, encountered the host in France. The time was. Gabrielle had been inadvertently caught by Blake's metaphorical pokeball, undergoing a sort of forced allegiance. Although her predominantly human heritage spared her from being completely subdued as a magical creature, her affection for Blake soared to remarkable heights. Consequently, she fulfilled all the criteria for inclusion in the illustrated book. After some thought, Blake said, "Let's hold off on including Gabrielle for now." In his heart, Blake distinguished between friends and followers. He had his own criteria for deciding who could be a friend and who should be considered a follower. Ding! The inclusion of this target has been postponed by the host. You can revisit this decision anytime by clicking here again. Overall, Blake was pleased with this development. The reward was indeed favorable. With the help of the Eye of Truth, Blake could effortlessly identify promising followers and benefit from the attributes of a group of high-quality juniors. After reviewing the functions of the illustrated book once more, Blake set it aside to explore further at a later time. His attention then shifted to the random mythical beast egg he had retrieved from the system's warehouse. This was a reward from the final settlement of the secret realm last time, and Blake had saved it for hatching today. Given his recent stroke of luck, Blake was filled with anticipation for the mythical beast that would emerge. The system's announcement echoed, "System! Hatching random mythical beast eggs," followed by a series of notifications about the selection and generation of a divine beast egg for the host. As the final beep sounded, the gray egg in front of Blake began to emit a soft glow. Having experienced this phenomenon before with the hatching of an ice crystal phoenix and a white tiger, watched intently as fine cracks appeared on the egg's surface, illuminated by the intensifying light. Suddenly, the eggshell shattered completely, capturing all of Blake's attention with the burst of golden light that followed. Expecting a beastly roar, similar to the one that had greeted the birth of Xiaobai, Blake was surprised by the silence. Without waiting further, he activated his ability to see through the blinding light, revealing the cause of the quiet. To his slight amusement, the source of the golden radiance was a small, shiny black turtle. Despite its unassuming appearance, Blake knew better than to underestimate it. After all, Xiaobai had initially seemed like a mere kitten. The turtle, though small and silent, exuded a golden legend-rank aura under Blake's discerning gaze, indicating its potential and strength. Approaching the turtle, Blake engaged with it, attempting to understand its abilities. Unlike Xiaobai, who could change size, this turtle seemed to have different talents. Through a series of gestures that seemed nonsensical at first, Blake deciphered that the turtle possessed the ability to divine, albeit in a limited capacity. It could not predict specific events, but could sense the general fortune or misfortune of actions before they were taken. Further inquiry into the turtle's capabilities led to a humble admission from the creature itself. Its primary trait was its extraordinary survivability. This, while not the most glamorous of abilities, was undeniably valuable. Blake, though momentarily speechless at the turtle's modest yet unique skill set, recognized the potential in having a companion who could navigate the fine line between fortune and misfortune, and who possessed an unparalleled will to survive. Despite the initial disappointment of not receiving a more conventionally powerful beast, Blake's curiosity and appreciation for the turtle's unique abilities grew. He realized that in the unpredictable world of magic and adventure, such a companion could prove to be invaluable. Blake, though initially skeptical about the little turtle's abilities, couldn't help but feel intrigued. After all, he reasoned, there was no such thing as a useless creature. Growing tired from squatting, he decided to sit on the ground, facing the turtle with a hopeful expression. "Could you help me with a divination? I'm curious if something good will happen tomorrow, wherever I go," Blake asked, his voice laced with a hint of excitement. He had quickly devised a plan to exploit the turtle's unique skill. If he couldn't predict future events directly, perhaps knowing the time and place to be for good fortune was the next best thing. The little turtle nodded solemnly before closing its eyes, concentrating deeply. Blake watched in confusion, wondering if the turtle's method of divination was somewhat unconventional. Just as he began to suspect the turtle was merely relieving itself, a radiant light enveloped the creature. To Blake's astonishment, the silhouette of a small snake materialized on the turtle's back, coiling around its shell before projecting a message towards him. Blake was taken aback by the sight, recognizing the imagery from Eastern myths and legends. The depiction of Xuanwu, a turtle entwined with a snake, was a symbol he knew well. As the light faded and the snake's shadow vanished, the turtle opened its eyes and began scratching the ground with its front paws. At first glance, the markings seemed random, but Blake found himself understanding the message as if by magic. "So, nothing bad will happen tomorrow?" he murmured, a hint of disappointment in his voice. The turtle, however, wasn't finished and gestured once more with its claws. This time, Blake's eyes lit up with understanding. "You mean to say that something good will happen 7 days from now, just outside the Gryffindor common room?" His voice was filled with newfound excitement as he gently patted the turtle's head. "Hank Yu Xiao He, that will be your name from now on." The turtle seemed to accept its new name with a contented click of its mouth. Turning his attention to a bucket of bluebird fish nearby, Blake decided to share his catch. "Qingnu, how about we give some of this to our new little brother?" he suggested, to which he received an enthusiastic chirp in response. Carefully, Blake sliced the fish into small pieces and placed them before Xiao He. As the turtle began to eat, Blake took the opportunity to collect a small sample of its blood. Given the turtle's remarkable divination ability, he speculated that its blood might possess properties conducive to longevity or energy revival. With the sample collected, Blake turned his focus to research, determined not to waste the additional time afforded to him by the lucky potion he had consumed earlier. His mind buzzed with possibilities, eager to uncover the secrets held within Xiaohei's blood. Chapter 249, The Consequences of an All-Nighter. Early the next morning, Blake made his way into the auditorium, his appearance marked by unmistakable signs of sleep deprivation. As he ambled past the long Gryffindor table, he casually greeted Hermione, who, unlike him, was the picture of vitality after a good night's rest. Upon noticing Blake's haggard appearance, Hermione couldn't help but express her concern. "Did you stay up late again? What time did you go to bed last night?" she asked. Blake turned to her, his eyes heavy and bleary. "Stay up late? That's an interesting question," he mumbled, running a hand through his already tousled light blonde hair, making it even more disheveled. "Actually, I didn't just stay up late, I pulled an all-nighter. So technically, there was no going to bed at all." Hermione stared at him, disbelief and concern etched on her face. "You didn't sleep at all?" she asked, eyeing the dark circles under his eyes. "Perhaps you need a mirror to see the state you're in." Blake, rubbing his eyes, responded with a weary smile. "Well, if it's an all-nighter, sleep isn't really part of the equation, is it?" Hermione sighed deeply, at a loss for words. Her concern for Blake's well-being was evident, but she knew scolding him would be futile. Instead, she offered a practical solution. "You should really get some rest. I'll speak to the professor and ask for leave on your behalf, okay?" Harry and Ron, who had been observing the exchange from a distance, were taken aback by Hermione's gentle approach towards Blake. They couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy at the special treatment he was receiving. No. I can't miss today's potions class. I have important matters to discuss with Professor Snape," Blake exclaimed, his fatigue momentarily forgotten at the mention of the class. Hermione, however, was insistent. "Potions class isn't until the afternoon. You should really get some sleep now. You can talk to Professor Snape later." Blake reluctantly agreed to Hermione's suggestion, though he wondered if Professor Sprout would mind him skipping herbology class to catch up on sleep. Hermione, ever practical, had a better idea. "Go to the school hospital," she advised. "Just tell Madame Pomfrey you're suffering from insomnia. She can give you a sleeping potion, and you can rest there." Blake was impressed by Hermione's quick thinking. Pretending to have insomnia would indeed provide a plausible excuse for his condition. "All right, I'll do as you say," he agreed. Hermione's face lit up with a satisfied smile upon hearing Blake's acquiescence. Meanwhile, Blake, using the eye of truth, noticed a golden aura surrounding Hermione, a testament to her potential and intelligence. Caught staring, Blake tried to deflect. Sorry? You just looked so cute. I couldn't help but gaze at you for a moment." Hermione, flustered and embarrassed by the public compliment, responded by playfully hitting Blake with her book, which he skillfully dodged. Their banter was interrupted by the notification of detected embarrassment, adding a humorous note to their interaction. Thanks to Madame Pomfrey's effective potion, Blake finally got the rest he desperately needed, sleeping through the day and only waking up in time for dinner in the evening. As soon as Blake woke up, he realized he had missed Snape's potions class. Beside his bed, a note caught his eye, penned in Hermione's neat handwriting. It read, "You need a good rest. Madame Pomfrey and I agree on this. Therefore, I've also requested leave for you from potions class. Please, don't stay up late again. It's detrimental to your health." Blake ran a hand through his hair, acknowledging Hermione's concern for his well-being, though he found it hard to comply. His daytime hours were consumed by classes, leaving him no choice but to seek out treasure chests at night. Opening these chests required a lucky potion, whose effects were long-lasting. To sleep immediately after would be a waste, especially since the potion heightened his senses, particularly high, his brain activity, sparking inspiration. Grateful for Hermione's care, Blake stored the note away, spoke with Madame Pomfrey, and was discharged from the infirmary. By then, it was dinner time, but Blake decided to seek out Snape before heading to eat, knowing the kitchen could always provide a meal if the Great Hall was closed. Upon reaching Snape's underground office, Blake knocked, only to find the door eerily ajar. Peering inside, he found no sign of Snape. Did he forget to lock the door? Where could he be? Blake wondered, puzzled by Snape's absence despite his keen senses. He surmised Snape must have left Hogwarts, leaving him to his solitude. As Blake turned to leave, a peculiar cauldron on Snape's desk caught his eye, stirring a sense of familiarity. Meanwhile, Snape, bracing against the cold September night, hurried back to his office, craving the warmth of a hot tea. To his shock, he found his office door unlocked and lights on inside. Fearing a theft of his potion ingredients, Snape prepared for confrontation, only to be met with an unexpected scene. Inside, the office had been transformed into a makeshift kitchen, with a table laden with ingredients, and at its center, his new unused cauldron, now bubbling with what was unmistakably not a potion but a hot pot. Blake, enjoying a piece of hot beef, greeted Snape with an offer to join him. Snapey, faced with the sight of his new cauldron being used for cooking, felt his anger surge, deducting 50 points from Hufflepuff in his fury. Minutes later, it became clear to Blake that Snape had no idea the cauldron's intended purpose was not for potions, but was perfect for cooking. A misunderstanding that led to an unexpected culinary adventure in the dungeons of Hogwarts. Blake, standing awkwardly in Snape's kitchen, realized his mistake when he saw Snape's twisted expression of irritation. "Ah, I misunderstood," Blake admitted sheepishly. "When I saw the pot, I thought you wanted to have hot pot. And well, I was hungry, so I thought I'd help get it started. There are so many ingredients, I figured I'd start eating and wait for you to come back." Snape's frustration was palpable, his nostrils flaring in anger. "Out!" he snapped. "Ahem, actually, I came to discuss something with you. Do you mind if I finish what I have to say before I leave?" Blake ventured, trying to steer the conversation back to his original purpose. Snape's lips thinned into a tight line, his expression menacing, yet he didn't outright dismiss Blake. "I've been studying a new potion recipe, and I believe it could benefit from your expertise," Blake continued, his confidence in his potion-making skills evident. His primary reason for visiting Snape was to boast about his latest discovery and, perhaps, to secure Snape's endorsement for a groundbreaking potion he had developed. The previous night, while analyzing the blood of a creature he referred to as Xiao Hai, Blake had identified a compound capable of promoting longevity. With the aid of a luck potion, he had successfully isolated this compound from a vast array of potion ingredients and refined it into a new potion formula. This potion had the potential to extend life and delay the aging process, using materials that were surprisingly affordable. Blake was convinced that such a potion would be eagerly sought after by many, particularly among the middle-aged and elderly wizarding community. The mere prospect of delaying aging would be enough to captivate many witches. As the inventor of this potion, Blake saw an opportunity to gain widespread recognition and potentially amass a fortune. However, he was aware that promoting a potion of this caliber would be challenging on his own. Skepticism would likely greet the claim that a second-year wizard had developed such a sophisticated potion. Therefore, he needed the endorsement of a respected potions master to lend credibility to his discovery. This was his secondary motive for approaching Snape. With Professor Babbling's ancient rune project at a standstill and unable to offer assistance, Blake saw the promotion of his longevity potion as a viable alternative. Blake had initially hoped to make a name for himself with a curse-breaking healing potion he was researching. However, that potion was still under development. The absence of such a potion in the annals of potion-making history underscored the complexity of creating it. As Blake spoke, he handed Snape a piece of parchment containing the new potion formula. Snape, initially reluctant, accepted the parchment, his curiosity piqued by Blake's persistence and the memory of Blake's previous assistance with Lily's ghost, a matter that still weighed heavily on his mind. Upon reviewing the formula, Snape's skepticism gave way to intrigue. After a moment of silence, he looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Did you really come up with this on your own?" Chapter 250, A Stroke of Genius, or a Stroke of Luck. Blake had anticipated Professor Snape's reaction. If Snape had glanced over his potion recipe without any sort of reaction, Blake would have seriously questioned the man's credentials as a potions master. "Yes, I was struck by a sudden inspiration last night," Blake began, his voice steady and confident. "In an attempt to capture that fleeting inspiration, I found myself working through the night. Fortunately, the effort paid off. I managed to draft this recipe. However, it's only a theoretical success at this point," he continued. "As you're well aware, the field of potions demands practical validation. There are still specifics regarding the quantities of each ingredient that need to be fine-tuned. I believe you're the only one who can assist me with this, Professor Snape." Throughout Blake's explanation, Snape's attention never wavered from the parchment in his hands. His lips were pressed into a thin line, a clear indication of his interest in the recipe's potential. Snape swiftly moved to his desk, pulling out a fresh piece of parchment. He began to write and sketch with a fervor, seemingly oblivious to Blake's presence. Blake, taking the hint, quietly seated himself and began to prepare the ingredients in Snape's new crucible, all the while observing the professor's expressions. It was a rare sight to behold. Snape's face transitioned through confusion, enlightenment, frustration, and surprise. For Blake, the spectacle was as entertaining as it was enlightening, providing a rare glimpse into the emotional range of the typically stoic potions master. After enjoying his meal and feeling quite satisfied, Blake noticed Snape finally setting down his quill, a look of disbelief etched across his features. "You're claiming you developed this overnight?" Snape asked, his tone a mixture of skepticism and awe. "Yes," Blake replied, his response simple and honest. "That's impossible," Snape exclaimed. "To produce this neutralizing agent alone, one would need to test hundreds of combinations. Your formula requires 7 neutralizers, each more complex than the last. It's inconceivable to gather all the necessary experimental data in a single night. Not even a month or a year might suffice, considering the potential for experimental error." Blake smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. Under normal circumstances, conducting experiments with such methodical precision would indeed take an inordinate amount of time. But Professor Snape, you must acknowledge that sometimes fortune favors the bold. "Good luck?" Snape echoed, his eyebrows arching in disbelief. "Indeed. Initially I had planned to approach this methodically, but as fate would have it, my first attempt at combining ingredients was a success," Blake explained. "But what about the other 6 neutralizers?" Snape interjected, the concept of such luck being beyond his comprehension. "That's where exceptional luck comes into play. Each neutralizer worked on the first attempt, allowing me to complete the formula overnight," Blake said, almost apologetically. It wasn't that Blake was being dishonest. It was genuinely a matter of extraordinary luck. He hadn't intended to concoct the potion formula in such a short span. According to his unique method, it should have taken at least 2 days. Yet, here he was, presenting a breakthrough that could potentially revolutionize potion making, all thanks to a stroke of luck that even he found hard to believe. What? But the aura of the lucky potion bestowed by the European Emperor is overwhelmingly potent. There was no need for Blake to painstakingly experiment. A randomly selected combination turned out to be the correct answer. It's as if the goddess of luck herself delivered the experimental results directly into Blake's hands. So what's left to experiment with? Blake hesitantly corrected Snape's focus. "Professor, are you sure your concerns are directed correctly? Isn't the effectiveness of his potion formula supposed to be the main concern? Yet, does Snape keep questioning the time spent on research?" Snape, realizing his oversight, refocused. Picking up a quill, he pointed at an ingredient in the potion formula and inquired, "This ingredient is poisonous. Why not replace it with aconite, which has similar effects but is non-toxic?" Clearly, Snape was astounded by the potion formula Blake presented. Even he couldn't comprehend many aspects of it. As Blake began to explain, Snape initially thought Blake's choice of toxic ingredients was due to a lack of knowledge in potion making and an unawareness of the reactions certain herbs could cause when mixed. However, Snape soon realized the error was his own. The toxicity of some ingredients was, in fact, integral to the potion's effectiveness. "Sometimes, 2 poisons can neutralize each other," Blake explained. "When mixed together, they don't become more toxic. Instead, the new substances they produce are exactly what's needed for the formula." Snape's eyes widened in realization. This was a revelation to him. He was unfamiliar with these combinations in the potion formula. "I never imagined that these 2 materials, which could potentially explode upon contact, would actually be the best choice in the correct proportions." At that moment, Snape felt as though he had unlocked a new realm of possibilities. Holding the magic potion formula, he was utterly captivated. He could spend all night marveling at this recipe. Blake smiled. "Professor, now that you've seen the path, you surely understand the effect of my potion, right?" Snape nodded. "It appears to be related to delaying aging." The prospect of delaying aging, thereby potentially extending life, was met with surprise by Snape. "Is this a rare life-extending potion?" Lifespan is a matter of great importance, both in the wizarding and muggle worlds. The desire for the Philosopher's Stone, which not only promises endless wealth but also immortality, is a testament to this. Throughout history, many have sought to create a life-extending potion, but without a magical material like the Philosopher's Stone, success has been limited. Many who claim to have developed such potions were frauds. Absolutely, Blake confirmed. Snape, a master of potions and dark arts, didn't need the physical potion to recognize its potential. Just a glance at the hastily drawn formula was enough for him to discern its effects. Taking advantage of Snape's astonishment, Blake quietly activated the Eye of Truth and observed a golden light emanating from Snape's head. This confirmed Blake's belief in Snape's genius in potions and dark arts. This magic potion of yours, if it succeeds, no, it will definitely succeed, Snape declared with conviction. The critical ingredients in the potion formula had been fortuitously chosen by Blake. The experimentation process, while not trivial, was not the most challenging aspect. The creation of this magic potion seemed inevitable. Snape looked at Blake, his expression serious. There's no doubt that this potion will come into existence. As the lead researcher, you can't escape with just a second-level medal of Sir Merlin. Snape's voice carried a hint of seriousness, mixed with a begrudging respect. If it weren't for your young age, you might have been awarded a level 1. Snape was speaking the truth. Blake's youth was his only impediment. If this potion were to be effectively promoted, Snape's endorsement was indispensable, and as long as Snape's name was associated with this new potion, he would undoubtedly receive a significant amount of recognition. Although many might be aware that these accolades had little to do with Snape's direct contribution, what did it matter? After all, few were willing to confront the uncomfortable truth that their knowledge of potions was surpassed by a teenager. Even Snape himself had initially struggled to accept this reality. Thus, Blake's potential first-level medal could very well end up being a second-level one. Blake smiled confidently, undeterred. It's fine. The first-class medal is mine to claim. Snape was momentarily taken aback. Then he remembered the formidable connections backing the young man before him. With figures like Dumbledore and Grindelwald in his corner, even the members of the Order of Merlin would think twice before denying Blake his due recognition. It's my oversight, Snape admitted, his gaze returning to the potion formula in his hand. All roads lead to Rome, but you, Blake, were born in Rome. You should prepare a paper, Snape suggested abruptly. The development and promotion of new potions required not only successful experimentation, but also a scholarly paper capable of impressing other potion masters. Blake understood this unspoken expectation. Snape's request implied his willingness to assist in refining the paper, leveraging his extensive experience in publishing scholarly works on potions. He knew well the common pitfalls new authors faced and could help Blake navigate them. Of course I'm ready, Blake responded, producing a lengthy scroll of parchment. You've already prepared your paper? Snape asked, surprised. How did you know I would assist you? Blake's foresight was not typical. Most potion masters only began drafting their papers after concluding their research. Snape's concern grew as he considered the implications. But if you've drafted the paper in advance, what about the data from the potion trials? It's fine. I'm confident in my calculations. Any discrepancies can be corrected later, Blake assured him. Snape, momentarily at a loss for words, unrolled the parchment to read. After a brief examination, he re-rolled the paper and placed it back on the table with a resigned expression. I'll publish it for you, he stated flatly. He had hoped to find areas to critique or improve, thereby restoring some of his pride as a professor. However, the paper was so meticulously prepared that it required no revisions. Now, all that remained was to brew the potion and confirm the accuracy of the data. You render me superfluous, Snape remarked, his tone dry. I'm beginning to suspect you sought my help not for assistance, but to flaunt your prowess. Blake touched his nose sheepishly, caught in the act. Snape's guess was spot on. Despite this, Snape couldn't help but acknowledge Blake's exceptional talent in potion-making, a rarity even by his standards. Just as he was about to offer Blake a rare compliment, his gaze drifted to the cluttered table nearby, where a newly purchased crucible, now repurposed to hold leftover soup, caught his eye. The sight made Snape's lips twitch involuntarily. Damn, my new crucible,